Tennessee.
I say no contract, you say no code. No contract, no contract.
If we ain't all free, ain't none of us free.
You're listening to Alabama's only union talk radio show, The Valley Labor Report, with Adam Keller and Jacob Morrison.
Hello, Tennessee Valley. This is The Valley Labor Report. My name is Jacob Morrison, here with my co-host and fellow agitator, Adam Keller, and we are broadcasting live online and on the radio from the heart of the Tennessee Valley, the Spice Radio studio in Huntsville, Alabama. Today, we've got a big announcement. Dr. Lois Weiner talks about the multi-front wars on education. The 4-month USW paper mill lockout comes to an end. Faith leaders rally around Alabama's coal miners. All that and more on today's program. If you want to be part of the show today, we've got a phone number. The line is not open because we've got such a packed show, but we are still going to be taking text messages. You can send us a text message. You can leave us a chat on Facebook and YouTube. So there's still definitely ways to get your voice heard during the program. Just not going to be taking live calls because we have a packed show. That phone number that you can send a text to is 844-899-TVLR. That is 844-899-8857. You can also leave a voicemail throughout the week. We always take those. So if you're listening to one of our videos on YouTube at 2 or 3 in the morning and you just want to, let us know a bad boss story or an organizing win, or you just want to tell us off, you can call us. It's not going to wake me up. I don't care. You'll leave me a voicemail and I'll get to it when I get to it, okay? And we might play it on the next program. So definitely consider that. The phone number is 844-899-8857. If you haven't gotten enough of us by the time that we wrap here on the radio, or if you just want to see what we're up to throughout the week, we do some other stuff throughout the week. We talk to folks. We have takes. Sometimes we'll write articles for other organizations, for other media outlets. And sometimes, most of the time we try to plug stuff whenever we write for other people, but we forget too. So if you want to keep up to date with us, you can find us online. We're on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, Twitch, TikTok, all at The Valley Labor Report. Just a reminder, your support helps us stay on the air. Our largest single source of funding comes directly from our listeners. So if you want to become a sustaining member of the program, make a one-time donation, buy our hat, or anything like that, you can go to our website. That's TVLR.fm. You can become a patron at patreon.com/The Valley Labor Report. If you're a member of a union, then definitely think about getting your local to sponsor the show. You can reach out to me for more details on that. We are going to go ahead and we're going to start the show off with our announcement. And we're pretty excited about it. I think that we are doing a pretty cool thing here on the Valley Labor Report, and we want to expand it. We've been in conversation with folks. We've been having business meetings internally to the program, and we've been having conversations with folks outside of the program, people who could fund an expansion of the project. And so we're gonna talk to you about that. We're gonna, we're always super transparent about stuff, and I don't see any need to hide anything. And so I want to bring y'all into it, and just to start off with, I think for us, first before we start off with that. This is going to be a pitch for donations, from yourself, from your locals, from your organizations, everything like that. Up front, that's what this segment is going to be. But, the big picture, and the plan is we're going to take you through our big picture goals for the project, for the Valley Labor Report. We're going to take you through our current state. We're going to take you through some of the next steps. our timelines and what it's going to take to get there, what we think it's going to take to get there. So, big picture, pie in the sky dreams, the reason that we started the project is that we reckon workers in the South need media built for them and by them. Media that reports on issues of importance to us, lifts up our stories, analyzes news from a worker's perspective. We want media projects that care about organization and collective power and serves as a hub for communal education. And, there are lots of projects that do a really good job of that. I'm thinking in particular of the Real News Network. They do great reporting on issues that, the mainstream media is just not really talking about. Labor Notes serves as that organizational and educational hub as well as a reporting project. And we want to obviously continue partnering with those projects, but we want to in particular focus on the South, because I think that the South does get left out of a lot of stories and narratives and especially on the electoral side. People just leave us out of the calculus, we're a big part of the country, and there's definitely some unique things, unique issues that we face, and also unique opportunities that we have here, we think. We think that we can be that here at the Valley Labor Report, and the only way to make that happen is to take the next step from a once-weekly radio program to something else, to something a little bit more than that. Before we take that next step, though, we want to talk about where we are, talk to you about what we do. Some people only see us on one, in one outlet. And so we want to explain to you the scope of the project as it sits, our budget, and all of this stuff. And so the first thing is the content. The only new stuff that we put out every week is our weekly live stream. We have 3 hours that is new content every week that we put out. Some of this is going to be news aggregation. Occasionally, we'll have some original reporting, and generally when we do that, we will be recycling reported pieces that we've done for other outlets. I've reported on the paper mill lockout, for instance, for both the Alabama Political Reporter and the Real News Network. But that's, as far as the project goes, that's the big thing is we've got this 3-hour live stream on YouTube and Facebook, and then we put it out on a half of that program out on the radio. We turn this 3-hour live stream into 2 1.5-hour podcasts that we distribute on all the different podcasting apps and all this. We turn it into 12 long-form videos every week on YouTube and Facebook, and we make 6 to 12 short-form videos on TikTok and YouTube. And so with all of this stuff, we reckon that our reach right now is online. We're hitting with we figure that we're hitting with every, minute of the program gets 300 to 500 people listening to it online, just online, which is, that's not bad for, something that we're doing mostly as a labor of love, right? We do have some people getting paid now, but the majority of the labor that goes into this is unpaid. And then we're on 3 terrestrial radio stations. We're on WVN in Huntsville, WZZA in Muscle Shoals, and WHIV in New Orleans. And we figure that those 3 stations combined, we're pulling about 10,000 listeners or something on the radio. Obviously, that audience is going to be a bit more transient, not as, interested in the project per se, but they just happen to be listening to us. And we've gotten some good feedback on that. Our budget is, so I was on Dell's show at one point, and he said something to me about, how he's, helped the WVNN has helped the show, and it has certainly, And and I mentioned on the show that we also write him a check every month, right? We write Cumulus a check every month, and and he texted me later. He was like, "I didn't mean to out you," and I'm like, "I don't know. It's not a secret, right? It's not. We're not weird about the money that we spend or take in." And so we spend $600 a month to be on WZZA. We spend $900 a month to be on Cumulus. We pay $100 a month for our website. We pay Joe, who is our post-production video guy. We pay him about $550 a month. We pay to rent Spice Radio Studios. We pay them about $360 a month, and we pay Jeff Michaels, who does our board op for us on back in Athens on WVNN. We pay him about $120 a month, depending on how many times he board ops for us. And then we have several sponsors, including listener support. And the latest that we've got right now is that we are spending $2,660, and we are bringing in $2,571. So we are, the last month, we were like $90 in the red, but it's not a big deal because the months before that we were a little bit in the green. We had a surplus of in 1 month. I think in November we had like $500, $600 over how much we spent. So it kind of fluctuates, but that's where we're at right now. In terms of the budget. And, I think that we're doing a pretty good job I think that we're putting out a good bit of stuff, interesting stuff for the budget that we have. And so what we want to do to take us to the next level, to bring us, to expand the project is we've got several ideas that we want to start doing, and we want to continue, obviously, doing the 3-hour live stream on Saturday. We are going to be doing a new live stream once a week that's going to be explicitly about labor education and history. Labor history and labor education. That's going to be Adam's project that he's going to do as a solo stream every week. And I'm really excited about that. It's not going to be a newsy thing. It is going to be explicitly labor history and labor education. So think, what happened in the 1979 Walker County teacher strike in Alabama, or steward trainings. How do you handle filing a grievance, or how do you handle representing yourself? How do you handle representing your coworkers, or how do you handle forming a committee in your workplace? All this stuff. And then we're going to continue with a 3-hour live stream, turning that into 2 1.5-hour podcasts. We're also obviously going to put that news live stream up as a podcast as well. We're going to continue with the long form videos on YouTube and Facebook. We're going to begin writing up these videos, writing up articles about some of these videos, and putting them on our website. We want to utilize our website a lot more in the coming year. And also writing up our segments and putting them out there as articles, adding some additional context, adding some additional graphics for written form stuff. I think that will also help the content travel more, because there's a certain audience that watches YouTube videos or Facebook videos, and then there's a different, much broader audience that will read articles. So, and it also opens up another avenue for sponsorships, right? We are going to begin doing 1 to 2 original reported pieces per week. That's going to be the goal once we begin this expansion. And that has always been something that we've been interested in, is building up our reporting apparatus, our ability to do actual original reporting as opposed to commentary and analysis. There's a lot of commentary and analysis stuff out there, regurgitation of things that other people have already reported on with a new spin, and that's fine, but a lot of people are already doing that, and so we want to contribute to the ecosystem of original reporting, and we're going to be doing that with Adam doing some original reporting, and we're going to be looking to hire freelancers to report for us. This is going to go on our website, and we'll also be relaying it on our program. We're going to be distributing these write-ups of the articles and the original reporting on to local news stations and the Alabama Political Reporter. We've had conversations with Josh Moon at the Alabama Political Reporter. He said that preliminarily they would have some interest in that, and he thinks that it's pretty likely that we'd be able to syndicate some of the stuff to local news stations. He seemed pretty bullish on that. I think Adam is maybe a bit more bearish, but we'll see. And if we can syndicate some of this original reporting in some of these interviews to local news stations, that'll greatly increase our the people that are actually seeing our stuff. We want to search out some 2-minute labor report hits on local news as well. Just a quick segment where regularly, like every Friday or something, we're getting on a local news station to talk about what happened last week in labor in Alabama. And we want to do newsletters, regular newsletters, every time we release new content, and start just doing more outreach via email. We want to, and so to do this is going to cost money, right? This is going to cost more money, and so we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about that budget.
Right, and one thing I'll add that we're very much interested in is expanding our reach on radio.
Yes.
I know we had a comment in the chat already. It's nice to be on old school AM radio, so we actually are going to be looking at additional radio stations, including, outside of our geographic footprint right now. There's a few areas of the state that we'd love to tap into.
Absolutely. So yeah, and to do this, and yeah, in the chat, the link to donate is on our website, and you can do that directly at tvlr.fm/donate. But we've set up a particular fundraiser for this as well, and we'll drop that here in just a second. But so to do this is obviously going to cost money. And one of the things that we wanted to do is bring everybody's hourly wage up a little bit, the people that are already working for us. Right now, everybody that works for us, that's going to be Joe and Jeff, we pay them $15 an hour. And Adam and Spencer does our post-production audio stuff. Our audio stuff, like our radio affiliates, he sends our stuff to them. He puts this stuff out on a podcast, all this good stuff. Adam, Spencer, and myself, we all volunteer our time. So I am going to remain volunteering my time because I have, I think, my financial, my job pays the most, and so I have the least need to actually be paid for my work here. And also, after this expansion, I'll be doing less work as it relates to other people. So, obviously, some of the costs are going to remain the same. Not going to be increasing our expenditures to WZZA or to Cumulus or for the website, but we are going to be increasing our hourly wage to $20 an hour for Joe and Jeff, as well as begin paying Spencer $20 an hour and begin paying Adam $20 an hour for 20 hours of work every week. We'll be bringing on Adam half-time to begin, doing this expanded stuff, getting, more original reported pieces out, search out for more places to syndicate the program. We also wanted to increase our contribution to Spice Radio since they've been such a good partner with us. And we're also going to be bringing on Tahira at $125 a week to do our accounting type stuff, to do our books for us, because I hate doing the books. It's my least favorite thing. And so with all of those new expenses, that's going to bring our total to $5,515 a month. With our current revenue, the current amount we're bringing in at $2,500 a month, that means we're about $3,000 a month short of where we need to be able to do this expansion. So then how do we want to do it? Well, so here's our timeline. We want to, in February, crowdfund $4,000. That's the goal for February. And so you can donate to that fundraiser at tvlr.fm/expand. tvlr.fm/expand. And so we're going to be plugging this every program during February, trying to get that $4,000. And with that $4,000, we will begin implementing the new budget in March. We'll increase the pay rates. We'll begin paying Spencer and Adam. Adam is going to increase his workload for the program. And from February to the end of March, we will be looking for new sponsors. We're already in talks with some other unions, the Alabama AFL-CIO. I've been talking to them about coming on as a sponsor, writing us some more money, giving us some more money. And
we're talking with lots of folks now.
Talking with lots of folks, and we think that we'll be able to do it. I am very bullish about our ability to increase our operating revenue, our operating income by $3,000 or $4,000, especially with Adam. I mean, Adam will be like tripling his time on the program, his time spent doing TVLR work, right? Because he hasn't been able to do as much as he will be once we're paying him to do this, right? It's obviously going to free up a lot of his time. And so I'm very bullish about this. I'm very excited about it. So if you want to support us as an individual, go to tvlr.fm/expand, tvlr.fm/expand. Donate to the program that way. If you're in a union and y'all haven't sponsored the show yet, but you think that it's worth it, definitely consider doing that, because we are going to be putting out more stuff. We're going to be on reaching more people with the new with the new partnerships that we're going to be getting. So definitely consider doing that. And if you're local sponsoring the show already, then maybe your international can also start sponsoring the show, right? Anything that you can do to help, greatly appreciated, would be greatly appreciated. So yeah, that's the plan. Want to be very transparent about that, and that's how much money it's going to take for us to do this. And this is, this is the timeline that we've got. So we're really excited about this. Share it with people that you think might be interested in donating, organizations that you think might be interested in donating, coming on as a sponsor. So yeah.
Yeah, I just want to say, I really appreciate everyone who has supported this program thus far. We are a fairly small program by most metrics, but I think we've been able to punch far above our weight in terms of the caliber of guests we've had on this show, in terms of the money we've raised for strike funds, in terms of in-person, training provided to members at the Alabama Troublemaker School and things of that nature. So, we're trying to grow this Alabama labor movement, and to do that requires a press and a media that is by and for and of working class people here in Alabama and across the South. And if you value that like we do, and there's anything you can do to help, we really appreciate it. We recognize that times are tough for a lot of us. We're working class people, so we don't have a lot of expendable income. So, financial contributions may not be possible for you. Believe me, I understand. There are so many causes that I want to donate to that I just simply can't afford to. But if you can spread the word, good old-fashioned word of mouth, social media, however you can spread the word and let folks know what we're trying to do, and how folks can contribute. We really appreciate it.
Yep. And so with that, just one more time, tvlr.fm/expand is where you can donate to that fundraiser. And we'll be sending out an email. If you're not on our email list already, then get on that by going to tvlr.fm/contact, and you'll be added to our email list. So with that, we're going to go ahead and get into the show. Going to go ahead and get into the meat of the show, and we will start with Last Week in Southern Labor. That's a segment that we do every week, mostly, where we tell you what happened in the labor movement in the South. We pull the information from Jonah Furman's newsletter, Who Gets the Bird, which compiles all of this information for the entire United States. So if you want to see what's going on outside of the South, then subscribe to that newsletter. That's going to be at whogetsthebird.substack.com. TVLR.com. And with that, let's jump into new organizing for the week of January 22nd to the 29th. Friend of the newsletter, Dave Infante over at Fingers wrote about the Independent Brewing Union of Georgia that was born in Athens, Georgia earlier this year. Definitely worth checking that article out. 155 workers for Find Help, which helps connect people with social services based in Austin, Texas, are organizing with OPEIU, Local 1010. 100 workers who make air conditioners for Carrier in Charlotte, North Carolina, are organizing with UA Local 421. 68 utility workers for Duke Energy in Charlotte, North Carolina, are organizing with IBEW Local 962. 6 telehealth nurses at DC's Shepherd Park Children's National are joining the National Nurses Union, the DC Nurses Association. In election wins for the last week, around 100 workers at a third Trader Joe's, this time in Louisville, Kentucky, voted to join the independent Trader Joe's United Union 48-36. 5 subcontracted workers who manage the FBI headquarters fleet of cars in D.C. voted 3-0 to join the Operating Engineers Local 99. In updates on strikes and bargaining, the ATU Local 689 transit workers remain on the picket line in Loudoun County, Virginia, against French subcontractor Keolis, and are taking the picket line to the French embassy in D.C. We're going to have more about that in overtime as we talk to former ATU organizing director Chris Townsend. Luis Felice Leon wrote for Labor Notes about the non-union restaurant strike at Twin Peaks in Brentwood, Tennessee, where both front and back of house workers have walked off in protest of particularly egregious harassment from management. In Florida, the 6 Union Service Trades Council Union has officially recommended its 45,000 members vote no on what Disney says is its best offer, and they just voted, and membership yesterday on February the 3rd voted down the contract offer from Disney by 96%. 96% voted no. Huge numbers there. 500 Charlotte, North Carolina bus drivers with SMART, Local 1715, who set a strike date earlier this month, apparently now have a tentative agreement. TWU Local 550 dispatchers at Southwest Airlines have a tentative agreement, and 8,000 airline mechanic Teamsters at United Airlines have ratified a deal. In Orlando, Florida, convention center workers for mega contractor Sodexo with Unite Here Local 737 ratified a contract after authorizing a strike, and notably won a similar wage increase as the union is fighting for at nearby Disney, that wage increase being $5 an hour added to the base wage over 3 years. And that's going to be it for last week in Southern Labor this week. Make sure that you check out Jonah Furman's newsletter. We're going to go ahead and head to our first break. On the other side of the break, we are going to be talking to Dr. Lois Weiner about the multi-front wars on education. So make sure you stay tuned. We will be right back.
IBW 558 is like a great football team. You've got to have the aptitude, skills, and knowledge to outperform the competition. If you're a non-union electrician, now is the perfect time to get off the sideline and join our team. We have the absolute best wages and benefit package in North Alabama and Southern Tennessee. It's because our team stands together, bargains together, and our families benefit from it. With immediate openings, you have the opportunity to see why the IBW is the right choice.
Support for the Valley Labor Report comes from the International Federation of Professional and Technical Engineers Union. Learn more by visiting www.ifpte.org.
The attorneys at Maples, Tucker & Jacobs have stood with the working people of Alabama for over 40 years, providing skilled legal representation for your workplace injury claims. When you are injured on the job, it can be a scary time. The attorneys at Maples, Tucker & Jacobs have the experience to guide you through the process to make sure that you and your family are properly taken care of and your rights are protected. If you need help, call the attorneys at Maples, Tucker, and Jacobs at 855-617-9333 or visit online at www.mtnj.com. No representation is made that the quality of legal services provided is greater than the quality of legal services provided by other law firms.
Support for this program comes from the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers, Local 136 out of Central Alabama. Learn more at ibew136.org.
Attention union members, membership organizations, podcasters, or anyone with a payment processing need. The future is here, and your organization needs to be prepared by working with Unionly. With Unionly, your union or organization can take payments on a mobile device, eliminating processing fees, giving you a better price than other payment processing methods, while at the same time supporting a union-friendly business with a specialized skill set to meet your needs. Your members will thank you when they pay their dues at their convenience without waiting in line to deposit cash or check. Start preparing for the future today by calling 206-595-8631 or visiting unionly.io.
Are you looking for a better future, a career that can have you set for life, and to be a part of something that's bigger than yourself? If you are, then consider a skilled trades apprenticeship with the International Union of Painters and Allied Trades. The work of IUPAT is all around us, from the industrial painters who work on the bridges to drywall finishers, floor coverers, the glazers who install the glass in our skylines, and so much more. With an IUPAT apprenticeship, you earn while you learn and receive benefits while learning the trade, including a pension. We provide world-class education free of charge. That's right, no student debt. Our starting salaries for apprentices that graduate is above the national median salary with benefits for entire families. And you have the flexibility to take your trade wherever you'd like in the country to work. IUPAT District Council 77 covers our entire region, so give Adam Booth a call at 205-603-3142 for more information. Again, that phone number is 205-603-3142. Come build a better future with us today and join IUPAT.
Come all you poor workers, good news to you I'll tell, how the good old union has come in here to dwell.
Labor creates all wealth should go to labor, and you are listening to the Valley Labor Report. My name is Jacob Morrison, and my co-host is Adam Keller. If you've got anything to add, you can send us a text message. The phone number is 844-899-TVLR. That is 844-899-8857. We did get a text from Infinite Content saying that we should keep our eyes on this one. It might be too late to consider for the main show. And that is true. It's an update on the Teamsters labor fight. But there is a good podcast called The Upsurge with Teddy Ostro that you should check out. That is going to be a podcast dedicated entirely to the union contract fight at UPS. So definitely consider checking that out. We appreciate the donations that have been coming in. We got a super chat from Ron M saying appreciate what you do. Thank you very much. And we got a super chat from Strom McCallum saying solidarity from South Carolina. Every little bit helps. Patrick Link in the chat says sent you 20 retail made dollars from Gunnersville. So that is we'll take it from anywhere. Absolutely. I have spent a lot of time in Gunnersville. Spent a lot of time in Gunnersville. So appreciate that. Appreciate all the support in any ways, whether financial or not.
Absolutely.
So so Adam, our first guest on the program, we're going to be talking about education. So this is really this is definitely your beat more so than mine. So why don't you start us off with where we're at and what we're going to be talking to our guest about?
Yeah, sure. So we've seen a lot of discussion lately in right-wing media and among Republican officials about school choice. They even have a little school choice week. We know that warring with public schools and universities and the unions representing those workers appears to be a key component of Ron DeSantis' presidential campaign. It's been in the news quite a bit lately. And we expect political attacks on public education in Alabama to ramp up. And it's important that educators, alongside the working class families that are served by public schools, it's important they be informed and they be organized to face these threats ahead. And one thing that I want to acknowledge is that we know public schools have their challenges and their flaws. We know there are legitimate problems to be solved. But the solutions won't come from the very same corporate and reactionary forces who've played a major role in causing these problems in the first place. We're asked to believe that introducing more profiteering off our children will somehow result in less corruption and better quality. But the evidence, of course, says otherwise. I want to be really clear that the school choice push is not about what's best for kids. It's about money, and it's about reactionary segregationist ideology. The alternative is that we demand great public schools for every child, in every family, in every community. It's not just about your family or my family, it's about the public as a whole. So with that preamble out of the way, really excited to bring Dr. Lois Weiner on the show. She is a longtime educator, activist, and scholar. She's the author of regular articles and multiple books specializing in urban teacher education and teacher unionism, all with a commitment to social justice and to the rank and file. I believe every educator and ally should be reading her stuff because of her sharp analysis of the intersection of labor and public schools.
Dr. Weiner, thanks for taking the time to join us. We really appreciate it.
Thank you for inviting me.
So, Adam talked about this preamble and we've been tracking a lot of fights in education, particularly around vouchers and privatization and things like that. And I do want to, we definitely want to circle back to that conversation with you because I think that we think that you've got really interesting things to say about that. But the reason that we brought you on today is to talk about your recent piece for Truth Out. Labor and education activists must challenge private tech. And, fighting technology was really not on my radar. Everybody touts technology as like this big, great thing, iPads in schools and stuff like this. And so what have I been missing here?
Well, you're not the only one who's been missing it, I have to say, so you can't beat yourself up.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it.
But I have to start off by saying that Adam's remarks were so great, I almost feel like I'm superfluous. So I'm really glad that you started off with that question. And I'll use your term circle back. But before I do that, I have to tell you, your show is so great. And it's so important. And I really do hope that people donate because I don't think that we can really revive the labor movement in this country unless we organize the South. We must organize the South. It's not an original idea of mine. Stanley Aronowitz talked about it, I think, brilliantly and completely in almost everything that he wrote. And of course, to organize the South, we have to deal with racism and social justice because the two are connected. And the other thing I want to say is that, this vernacular about this language about school choice, it's really important to understand that it echoes the same lies in the term right to work. What does right to work mean? Right to work means the right to work for slave wages under conditions that the wealthy and the powerful and the boss set for us. What's school choice about? The choice of attending any school that billionaires, wealthy elites, and the people who I'll call the ruling class determine is what we should have for an education. And the reason education is so much in the news, and the reason the attacks on public education and teachers unions is so powerful, is that, number one, education in every society is the way we reproduce the society. We either reproduce everything that's crummy about it, or we reproduce what's good To reproduce what's good, it means we have to disrupt things in the present system of public education. And it is that disruption of inequality and injustice that the right wants to end. That's what these attacks on public education and teachers unions are about. So there's no separating the so-called culture wars from the privatization of public education. And it is shocking and shameful that the leadership of both teachers unions has not made that connection between the privatization and the profiteering, the inroads of the ruling class, their control of policy or their influence in policy in both political parties. It's just a disgrace that the leadership of both unions have not made that connection. And they allow the right to separate. They allow DeSantis to separate the culture wars, his attack on transgender youth, on the most vulnerable, the rollback of all the gains that the disability rights movement, not to speak about gender equity, reproductive freedom, right, and racism. There is absolutely no separating those. And a great article by Maurice Cunningham in the National, in the NPE newsletter that I tweeted it. He just makes that connection. These parent groups are being funded by the far right. Why have our unions not been talking about that, right? These are astroturf groups. Okay, now that I've said that, let me go back to what people are not talking about.
No, absolutely. And while you're talking about that, I mean, I don't follow. I'll take your word for it about the teachers unions. They're not making this connection. I don't follow them as much as you and Adam do, but the connection is not difficult to make. I mean, any of these, especially now. I mean, maybe at the beginning there was this faux distinction between these movements, but anytime you just have one of these videos of in some cases, it's just a video of a teacher who is gay, right? And that's the extent of the controversy in the video. And then sometimes, you have teachers who are just people, who are just workers, saying like weird things or, things that are maybe not exactly the way that they ought to be said or something, or they're going outside of the curriculum. And, I'm not opposed to saying that, there are times when people make mistakes and people do things that they shouldn't be doing, and that's fine. But every time that one of these videos crops up, every time, in the comment sections is full, the quote tweets are full with school choice now, school choice now, school choice now, which is just privatization. It's just taking money from the public and funneling it into these private systems. It's more,
Jacob, it's more. And we have to say that it's more. It's not just a matter of profit. It's also a matter of ideological control. Right. And it's a matter of controlling what's taught, what's learned, and teachers' work. That's what I'm talking about with the reproduction of the society. And the technology piece fits into that. The reason it's important to understand, it's not just about money. Of course, in the last analysis, in the broad analysis, what the unions are missing that you just described is a class analysis, which neither union talks about. They don't talk about the working class.
Right.
The only people who talk about the unions don't talk about the working class, right? Right. The Democratic Party certainly won't talk about the working class because it's looking to get suburban middle class voters to support them. But the unions should be talking about the working class. And the union should also be talking about capitalism, which is something that everybody does but the unions. Only the unions don't talk about capitalism. Isn't that peculiar?
Right.
Or interesting? Right? They're afraid to talk about capitalism, right? So, and what's interesting to me is that when Sanders talked about capitalism, he was very appealing and he talked about the working class. He made inroads into into a demographic that the Democratic Party actually wrote off, right? Which is white workers. people with less than a college education. Okay. But to get to what my most recent work has been, and I'm so glad you've asked me, because I feel sort of like Cassandra about this. And I don't think it's too late for us to do something about it, but they've already made the ruling class has already made extraordinarily powerful inroads in changing teachers' work. And they did that through standardized testing.
Mm-hmm.
And you can't separate back 15 years ago, in education, we heard about data-driven decisions, evidence-based education, right? The question is always, whose evidence? What questions are you using? Who's making the decisions about what evidence, right? And the origin, although the rationale for standardized testing has always been equalizing educational opportunity. That was the rationale when standardized testing was first introduced in the Johnson era reforms, the war on poverty, right? But that rationale was exploited for very different usage and for very different purposes during the Obama administration in particular. And that rationale about equalizing educational opportunity was used to support the use of standardized tests to control everything in education, including standards. And if you look at where the standards come from, that the schools that the standardized tests are based on that are used in this country, no parents, no teachers, nobody, students, nobody was involved in developing those standards that the evidence that people are judged on in the standardized tests, the curricula, right? Nobody. Those standards were developed by international finance organizations like the OECD and the World Bank. And a lot has been written on that. And that's like volumes have been written. It's not a conspiracy theory, it's fact.
Right.
The standards are used globally. They're globally, and it's about international competition. International competition to have a workforce that can compete in the 21st century. So as soon as you see that rationale, you know that what's going on is education, control of the education of workers and of work. Now we come to information technology. What's the role of information technology what's its relationship to work? Well, its relationship to work is that it's transforming work. It's altering who does what and how, right? It's impoverishing the way information technology has been used. Take the algorithms that are used for food delivery, the algorithms that are used for Uber drivers, the algorithms that are used in almost every occupation, right? To determine what your job is,
Mm-hmm.
Right? Working class jobs, not even just in working class jobs. So just since the beginning of the year, there have been so many articles about AI. Have you noticed that?
Oh, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Why all of a sudden all these articles about AI? I mean, information technology has been altering work for the last 15 years. And it's also altered education. Teachers, since before the pandemic, have been using software and platforms controlled by ed tech companies. It's privatized. The control of our curriculum and of their work has been privatized. Teachers have been using assessments, supposedly of kids' social and emotional learning, right, on platforms, filling out assessments of kids at recess. Now, what happens to that data? Number one, that data follows the kids. There are no controls on what happens to that data in terms of following the kids or their parents. There are inadequate controls, almost no or inadequate controls on that data being sold, bought and used. And every day we see in the papers, if you read the business sections especially, you see another expose about how data has been misused. I just saw something about a health app being sued belatedly. I want to point out that the World Development Report of 2 years ago talked about the need for capitalism to start policing, better policing the use of data. So these exposés about how our data has been used without our knowing it, and the imposition of what seem to be privacy controls has to be understood as capitalism understanding that they have to act like they really care about what happens to us. But in fact, while these significant but not life-altering or work-altering exposés are occurring, what's happening at the same time, at the very moment, is the explosion of the use of AI. AI is already being used in test preparation. Let's think about what that means in teaching, where most of teaching is now test preparation because standardized tests drive the curriculum. What does that mean? What that means is that a future has been prepared for us in which neither teachers, students, parents, nor even elected government officials control what is taught or how. It is an effort to alter, completely change teachers' work. Completely change teachers' work. The curriculum will be set by these international authorities. Teachers will use, to some extent, platforms that have been created for them, right? And students will learn how to compete for jobs in an economy and in workplaces that the boss controls with things like AI.
Right. Right. I mean, it's like getting them ready, because so much of this is like getting you ready for the workforce. And I'm glad you mentioned in terms of the algorithms and how that's affecting working people, because you're seeing a lot of the same trends filtering down into the schools, not just for the educators themselves, but for the students and the way
It's the
they're
Amazon
being taught.
warehouses.
Right.
It's the Amazon warehouses, right?
Right.
Their work is not, they don't control. It's like the speed of the assembly line, right? The having somebody actually control the assembly line is now actually, that has been replaced with algorithms and surveillance.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right?
I mean,
the
it's
surveillance of technology.
Yeah, and that's the thing that, I'm glad you incorporated that, because public education is facing attacks and challenges from so many multiple directions, and we have to connect those dots, and we can't leave the technology piece out of that puzzle, right? That's a very important piece of the puzzle that fits in to this broader picture of control, of decision making. And one thing that I really loved about the way you opened that article is commenting on the fact that conventional wisdom has been it's been accepted as conventional wisdom by unfortunately too many educators, but certainly by most politicians and others, that the education of children is to prepare them for the workforce, right? College and career readiness. That's all we ever hear about. And there is something just, to me, very sad that we have abandoned the humanistic ideals that was behind, the push for public education in this country in the first place. That there's an idea that we, the public, benefit from having an educated public. And we, as the public, see a benefit in investing in young people, that they can realize their potential and receive a holistic education so that they can live up to that potential, whatever that may be. And it has just, over the years, it has just slowly but slowly morphed into, it is career prep, it is workforce prep, and of course, for most working class people, these are the experiences you're getting prepared for, right? The Amazon warehouse worker experience. So I really appreciate you putting that out there. I wanted to ask a little bit about some of the other threats to public schools and how they fit into that. A couple of things you mentioned would be voucher programs and then the wars around curriculum. And I'm so glad you emphasized earlier that this is not like a separate arena of culture war over here and then privatization over there. The two are so linked together. So I don't know if that's not much of a question really, but if there's anything you want to kind of expand on that, how does some of these other attacks
I
on
would
public
say
schools fit in?
it's more than they're being linked. I want to say it's frequently people say to me, well, how do we reconcile the union's responsibility to defend workers' economic self-interest with these social justice issues?
Right.
And my answer is they're the same project. They're the same project. The ruling class doesn't separate them.
Right.
They don't separate them. They manipulate. They manipulate anger, frustration, and fear about social change for their own end. And what is their end? Control of society and profit. That's their end. So they don't separate them. Why do we in the labor movement? Or why do we on the left? They're the same project. They're absolutely the same project. That's why I talked about the relationship between right to work and vouchers and school choice. Destroying public education, destroying, it's not public education, because public education, if we understand public education as a system that's publicly funded and publicly controlled, that's what they want to destroy. But what is the public there? The public is democracy. And the original slogan of the AFT, John Dewey, was that we needed democracy in education and education for democracy. They want to destroy democracy because democracy is a threat. It's as simple as that. That's why their claims about school choice and wanting every child to have access to a quality education is just orchestrated hypocrisy. That's what it is. It's orchestrated hypocrisy.
Right.
And it's orchestrated hypocrisy. Now, what they will say in response is something that Adam actually alluded to. Well, you're defending a system that was bad to begin with, that you're defending a system that never allowed equal educational opportunity. And I'm not defending that system.
Right. I mean,
I don't think there can be any return. There's no golden age to which we can return. And I think Adam, it was great that he started off by saying that. I don't want to return to the old, but you don't have the right to determine what our future is going to be. And that's the question. Who determines our future? Who determines how we're going to use technology? Who determines that? And I am not afraid to have working people involved in those decisions and involved in those discussions. In fact, I welcome it. I welcome it. And there's some people say, well, you know, some teachers say, well, we can't have parents involved. They don't know as much as we do. I don't think that's the case. I think that parents bring a kind of knowledge that we don't have. And the knowledge they have is of their children outside of school. And the knowledge they have is the community as they experience it. That doesn't mean the parents are right in everything that they want for their kids. But it does mean that our job as educators is to be in conversation with parents and community, and to not write them off as deplorables or being captured by the churches, or because that means that people, if when we do that, that means that we're rejecting a central tenet of our profession, which is that people are educable.
Absolutely.
Right? People are educable. And the question is, how do we engage with them? And I think one of the best places for that engagement is in our role as teachers. But for that to happen, we have to look outside of our classrooms. We have to look outside of our classrooms. We cannot just shut the door. I just read a piece. Someone asked me, well, how do you know about everything that's going on with technology? And the way I know is not by reading what people in education are saying. What I know is by reading the publications about education and ed tech that are put out by businesses.
Mm-hmm.
And boy, are they sophisticated. They are so much more sophisticated than the unions. I have to tell you, the right and the neoliberals are so much more sophisticated than the unions. You know, they have this project called the Progressive Policy Institute, and they even sell merch at the Progressive Policy Institute. The Progressive Policy Institute is neoliberal. It self-identifies as neoliberal. So they've even usurped that term, progressive. Right?
Oh my gosh.
That's right. They've usurped our language. We can't be afraid to say the truth. I think that's it. We can't be afraid to say the truth. And we have to say, if you are giving recommendations about teaching and you are not looking outside of the classroom about what is happening in work, then your recommendations are not ones that we should be taking. And that's what I say to all of these articles that are about how to use the chatbot and AI. I'm not reading, it's not a matter of reading. Don't trust anybody who is not talking about the way AI is degrading work, because we have to make our decisions, and the reasons that AI is being used in the way that it is, not for our benefit, for theirs.
Right. Of course, and what you mentioned about the business publications is really such an important and really unfortunate thing. But it's something that many people have mentioned, that the business, if you go and you read the Wall Street Journal, the business press type stuff, their news sections are generally really good and sophisticated and accurate, because the owning class needs to understand what's happening so that they can they can make their decisions about how to fight working people, right? And I saw somebody, I think maybe it was Doug Henwood on Twitter, say that you'll see a lot of vulgar Marxist analysis in the business press, and because that it's pretty explanatory in a lot of instances, right?
Well, you understand what they're thinking, right? You understand what they're thinking, but the other thing about reading these ed tech newsletters and magazines, I actually posted on Facebook an article that was extraordinary about what their plans are. something under, not their plans, what's underway. And somebody went to try to read the report. And the report cost, to get a copy of the report cost $5,000.
Wow.
Now, why? Who's their audience? It's not public school teachers.
Right.
It's not researchers like me, right? Who's their audience? People in Silicon Valley and Wall Street who want to know where to invest their money. And we have to be looking at the way technology is transforming work, and to understand what is going on in our classrooms and our work. That's it. And they're already, I once heard Ursula Hughes say, she's a UK researcher who does research for unions about use of technology. And this is many years ago. She said, by the time the unions come to me and they say they want help, it's too late because the project has already been done. The jobs have already been outsourced. There's nothing they can do to keep the project from proceeding. Now, I don't think we're there yet with AI. I don't think we're there yet with AI. But I think what we want to say to parents, unless you want your children to have a job that's being destroyed by technology, a job in which their bodies are going to suffer because algorithms are going to control the pace of work, and because they're not going to have any say in the conditions of their labor, you need to join with us. You need to join with us in stopping this standardized testing, because this standardized testing is the root of their control. Now, what are we going to say about equality? We're going to say there are good measures of how to judge what kids are learning other than the standardized tests. They cost more money, they require professional judgment, and we need to have parents and community involved in our using them and disseminating the results. But Wayne now has a new book about that, where he talks about the alternatives to standardized testing as a means of assessment and evaluation. And we have to be talking about that in this discussion of learning loss. That's what we have to talk about. What does that mean? What did they really lose?
Right. Yeah, I've been wondering, what did they lose exactly? You know, you've kind of alluded to it a little bit in terms of some of maybe the lack of response from union leadership, and you know, you and I had talked before the show. I'm certainly very familiar with with union leadership not getting this, and just, you know, either not wanting to understand it, but they're certainly not understanding it in many cases, the multi-front piece to this. How do you think rank and file educators are responding, or maybe more appropriately should be responding? And you've spoken a little bit about this in terms of coalition with parents and students and communities, but as we wrap up here, you know, what's kind of your final message maybe to Alabama educators? And I also want to say we're going to have you back on, because I have a lot more I'd love to talk with you about. But you know, to any Alabama educators out there listening, do you have some messages for them in terms of how they should respond?
Well, I want to say not just Alabama educators, but people who care about what goes on in the schools, right? And that means workers as well, whose kids are in school, not just teachers, or people who work in schools. I think that we need to defend the dignity of our labor.
Amen.
And people go into teaching because they're looking to make a difference in the world. They want to make a difference, though, by influencing individual kids' lives. And our capacity to do that is shrinking by the minute. because the conditions of our labor have been altered without our consent and without our involvement. And to me, that's our struggle. That's our challenge, and our professional obligation is to push back on the degradation of our work and the attack on the motives on our ideals, as our professional ideals. And one of the most potentially powerful means we have of doing that is by organizing as workers. And if the unions or the organizations that say they represent us are unwilling or unable to do that, then what we have to say and do is say, move over, and let people who understand that we have to fight and that time is running out and that our kids and our profession matter, move over and let us do it.
Amen. I think that's a great place to leave it.
Yep. Thank you
Good.
so much, Dr. Weiner.
Thank you
Appreciate
for
your time.
inviting me, and I'd love to come back. I think your work
Awesome.
is great,
Absolutely.
and I'm going to write you a check.
You are so sweet. Well, thank you
Thanks
very
much.
much, and I really
Thank you
enjoyed
for
it,
inviting me.
and we'll be in touch.
Okay,
Absolutely.
very good. Bye-bye.
Bye.
We've got some great discussion in the chat about some of this, and one of the things that Free American 2020 in the chat mentioned is that our schools only focused only on college, and we harmed many kids. That's that's really going to what, Adam, you were saying about the college and workforce preparedness of school today.
Right, and of course that
yeah.
depends on what family you're coming from and what neighborhood you're in, right? Because
Right.
there's some schools where there's a recognition that most of the kids who are coming from poverty are not going to college, right? So they are more explicit, I believe, in preparing them to go work in manufacturing and logistics and things of that nature. But you're right. I mean, so many folks were pushed towards that. And that, brings up other issues in terms of trade unions needing to be inside our schools and talking to students about the opportunities they
Absolutely.
have there. There's a lot more we could dig in for sure,
Yeah.
for sure. But really appreciate everybody tuning in and participating in the chat. And definitely enjoy talking with Lois.
Appreciate the $5 super chat from Infinite Content. Do not think I forgot about the groundhog slander you made this week. This means war with Pennsylvania. And absolutely, I am proud of I'm proud of what we did.
Did you have some hot takes online? Is that what it was?
Yeah, well, it was actually just a very like an ice cold take, because it is just objectively the correct take to have on this issue. And that is that, Punxsutawney, whatever, I don't even know his name because it doesn't matter. He said that we're going to have 6 more weeks of winter, where Sand Mountain Sam, WAFF 48 News reports, a possum on Sand Mountain. Sand Mountain Sam says he predicts an early spring. And so, Phil is canceled. Sound Mountain Sam's day has come. APOD got on the program. They jumped on the bandwagon with us. All hail Sand Mountain Sam from APOD. So yeah, absolutely not afraid of the, and if it means more with Pennsylvania, that's fine. I don't care.
I'm going to stay out of it. I mean, I love our possums now. I'm a fan
Absolutely.
of possums. I do think they're pretty cool. But I'm going to stay out of it. I'll be the neutral party. I'll try to intervene should, tensions get too rough.
All right, folks, we're going to go to a break. We will be right back. Not going to be able to get to we're not going to be able to get to the rest of the stories that we had in the main show, but we will talk about them all in overtime. On the other side, we're going to make sure that we hit this story about the resolution for the paper mill, and then we'll get to the updates in the mine worker strike in overtime. So we will be right back to round out the main show. Don't go anywhere. You're listening to the Valley Labor Report.
There's a lot of talk about a shortage of workers, but that's not the case with IBW 558. We have provided our customers over 3,000 workers and performed over 3 million man-hours in a pandemic year. With 8,000 OJT hours, 900 classroom hours, OSHA 30, and a state license, our members receive the equivalent of a master's degree. That's what makes IBW 558 the right choice for your electrical needs. Look us up at Facebook or at IBW558.org.
North Alabama DSA is looking for folks to work for a better North Alabama. They prioritize mutual aid, municipal activism, and union solidarity. Contact them on social media or dsanorthalabama@gmail for more information.
Support for this program is provided by the International Association for Machinists and Aerospace Workers, Local Lodge 44 in Decatur, Alabama. Learn more at iamaw44.org.
Support for this program also comes from the Iron Workers, Local 477. So if you are looking for contractors with lower than average EMR and TRIR, they tell me that if you need to know what those mean, then you will. Or if you need to supplement a workforce at any level for any amount of time, short or long term, if you need iron workers that come trained and certified at no extra cost, or if you need workers from superintendent down to general laborer, and you're looking to start work on a project, or you're unhappy with your current contractor situation, you need to call my friend Jeb Miles with the Iron Workers Local 477. They only work with the best in the business, vetted contractors, and can do all kinds of jobs from roofing to steel and bridge erection, from welding to heavy rigging, from structural repairs to machinery alignment, and much more. They supply manpower on 4 of the 5 largest projects in North Alabama, so you know they're legit. If you need good quality, safe, efficient, diligent, and knowledgeable workers on your job, then you need the Iron Workers Local 477. Call Jeb Miles at 256-383-3334 or via email at local477@bellsouth.net, and make sure you tell them that you heard about them on the Valley Labor Report.
We're the nurses, firefighters, and claims representatives that help keep our government services running. We respond to natural disasters. We care for our nation's veterans, and we investigate discrimination in the workplace. We are federal and D.C. government workers, and we are proud to serve the American people. Working in more than 70 agencies across the government, we know we can fulfill our mission because our union has our back. Learn more at afge.org. Paid for by the American Federation of Government Employees, AFL-CIO.
Support for this program also comes from the Mid-South Council of Retail, Wholesale, and Department Store Union. Learn more at rwdsu.info.
Come on, you poor workers, good news to you I'll tell. How the good old union has come in here to dwell.
Alabama's only union talk radio show. This is the Valley Labor Report. My name is Jacob Morrison. My co-host is Adam Keller. If you've got anything to add, you can send us a text message. The phone number is 844-899-TVLR. That is 844-899-8857. We also take we check out the chat, and if there's something, particularly that we want to pull out, we will. And also, there's always lots of good conversation going on in the chat, just internal to the chat. So definitely, if you watch on YouTube, or if you don't watch on YouTube, you might want to watch on YouTube. That way, you can participate in the chat. Also wanted to make sure that I read this because we haven't got the ad into the rotation yet. I think we'll be able to get it into the rotation next week. That's the plan. But laborers, the Laborers Local 366, the Laborers International Union of North America, Local 366 is proudly recruiting North Alabama workers to work construction and nuclear plant maintenance. If you are interested in a job like that, then contact Donna at their training center to start the process. The phone number is 256 256-415-7452. Again, that phone number is 256-415-7452. No experience is needed. Free training is offered. You do have to be able to pass a background check and a drug test. Local hiring that grows our community with good-paying jobs that have benefits is our mission. Live better, work union, Local 366, feel the power. All right, so we wanted to make sure that we mention this. We have been covering pretty closely the lockout at the West Rock Paper Mill in Cottonton, Alabama. They have been locked out since October the 6th. You can go back and check out our coverage on our channel page if you want to see more in depth. But basically the gist of it is that they were too far apart, and so the workers there voted down the contract that was offered by West Rock, and they said, no, we're not going to take this, even though West Rock was offering a $30,000 buyout of this language. So they were very motivated to get rid of this language. And the workers said no. The workers said, we want to keep this language. We, maybe this $30,000 makes us whole for this one contract period, but we know that you're not going to give us $30,000 in the next contract period, which is only 3 years away. And so, we can think a little bit more long term than that. We are, we are intelligent actors, right? Self-interested in all of this. And so they said no. We're going to vote that down. We think you can do better in a year where, immediately after West Rock had made more money than they ever had in the company's history. They made so much money that, if I recall correctly, the calculations were that if they just gave half of the profit to the workers, they could have given everybody a $30,000 bonus across all 50,000 global employees, right? With just half of the profit from 2021. I mean, it's just insane that they were trying to do this, trying to take from these Alabama workers what would amount to a 10% pay cut. So it's just really, really gross behavior from this company. So the workers said no, and the company locked them out. After voting on contracts 4 different times across this lockout, they accepted the most recent offer last week. It was on January 31st, I believe, is when they held their vote, and they did vote to accept it. They voted to accept this contract. And the contract, the difference between this contract and the last one is that, so on top of the 2 or 3% raises that they were getting in the first contract, which is way below inflation, they got $1.50 an hour raise across the board. They're also adding an additional 1% into the employee's 401k account. I think that they made some improvements on their health care instead of cuts, or instead of saying the same, which is good. And they got a $7,500 one-time bonus. WRBL reports that Local 971 President Bobby Watson says that that all of these taken together, all of these additions taken together, approximately make up for the taking of the Sunday premium pay. So that's good news. I think I think definitely, I know that Bobby was looking for more. I know that a lot of people were looking for more. But taking on a multi-billion-dollar international company as one paper mill in Alabama is just a really hard thing to do. So I think that, getting what they can and going back into work, it's certainly not an irrational move on their part. I'm hopeful, and I saw some discussion in the comments when they announced this on their union's local page. There was some discussion about, 3 years will be here before you know it. We want to make sure that we're ready, next time to get what we left on the table. And so I do hope that they, that there is and this is what Bobby was saying to me at one point when we were talking over the course of this lockout, that the West Rock meant this to really destroy the union and break it up, and that he feels like the three locals in that mill are more unified than ever, that they're more militant than ever, more antagonistic towards the company than ever, right? Which is ultimately going to be good for the union going forward in contract negotiations. I hope, and I hope that a lot of these folks will, in the next round of contract negotiations, they'll be able to do more planning and more coordination between the other West Rock locals, right? Because that's what it would really take to bring the corporation to its knees, is multiple mills going out on strike together, right? That's what it would take. And so here's hoping, they've got 3 years to prepare for the next round of contract negotiations. And I know that, there's going to be a lot of motivation there on their part to do that. Something that I want to do here in the next few months is get on the program some people that were involved in a lost paper strike in Maine in 1987 to talk about some lessons that they learned from that, and maybe lessons that and obviously talk to some of these paper mill workers in the coming months. I've got that Real News piece that was going to be coming out, that was going to be a little bit longer, about the lockout. It's going to be transitioned into a people's history of the Mart Mill lockout. So looking forward to that. They return to work on the official return to work date hasn't been set. I think they're going to stagger the return for people, and it's going to be towards the end of February. So. Very happy for these folks that they're going to be able to get back to work. I know that 4.5 months without a paycheck is incredibly difficult, and they showed a lot of courage and a lot of fight, and they won some things, right? They won some things, and so that's really good to see. And with that, we're going to be wrapping up our time here on the radio. We have a lot of great stuff coming up for overtime, so make sure that if you're listening to us on the radio, you find us online on YouTube or Facebook so that you can continue listening to the program. We have a couple of plugs, just don't forget, the UMWA folks are still on strike. You can support them at paypal.me/UMWA Strike Pantry. The Alabama Arise and Cover Alabama are hosting an online advocacy training on how to talk to your legislators. That training is going to be February 7th from 5:30 to 6:45 p.m. So go to their websites, Alabama Arise or Cover Alabama Online, to register. Looks like a really great panel with Akeisha Anderson. She's the Alabama Arise Policy and Advocacy Director, Debbie Smith, and David Stout. Labor Notes has some February workshops, so go to labornotes.org to check that out. And go ahead and make sure you stay with us for overtime. We are going to be reacting to a Labor Day message that Steven Crowder had a few years ago, comparing it to his current stance on contracts. We're going to be talking to Julia Rock about a recent piece in The Lever about the National Restaurant Association. We're going to be talking to Chris Townsend, former International Organizing Director for the Amalgamated Transit Union, about the Keola strike in Virginia. Lots of great stuff that we're going to be going over in overtime, so make sure that you stay tuned. All power to the workers. All right, folks, we got rid of those folks on the radio. Howdy, thanks for tuning in. Thanks for staying with us. We've got some great stuff. Like I said, we're going to be talking some about this mine workers, faith leaders, the letter that these faith leaders had for the mine workers in support of them. Going to be talking about, going to be reacting to this Labor Day message that Steven Crowder had. Lots of great stuff. So we're going to take a short break, and we are going to be right back, so make sure you don't go anywhere.
Come on, you poor workers, good news to you I'll tell. How the good old union has come in here to dwell. Go to Harlan County, there is no neutral there. You'll either be a union man or a thug party H player. Which side are you on? 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 Come on, you poor workers, good news to you I'll tell. How the good old union has come in here to dwell. Which side are you on? 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 Come on, you poor workers, good news to you I'll tell. How the good old union has come in here to dwell. Go to Harlan County, there is no neutral there. You'll either be a union man or a thug party H player. Which side are you on? 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 Come on, you poor workers, good news to you I'll tell. How the good old union has come in here to dwell. Which side are you on? 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 Which side are you on?
Welcome back. This is the Valley Labor Report, Alabama's only union talk radio show. We are now in overtime. We are now in overtime. This is the second half of the program that is online only. We have gotten rid of the FCC censors. We are casual and we are let loose here in overtime. We've got some really great stuff for you. the interviews. We're going to be talking to Julia Rock about her article in The Lever, Fear and Loathing Among Union Busters. Really great stuff about the National Restaurant Association's conference that they had a couple of weeks ago. We're also going to be talking to Chris Townsend about the Keolis strike. And we're going to be talking about Steven Crowder's Labor Day message and thinking about some inconsistencies maybe that he has now compared to then.
No.
Some pretty interesting stuff.
Really?
Yeah, pretty interesting stuff. Want to plug again our fundraiser. You can donate online at tvlr.fm/expand. Expand. tvlr.fm/expand. We have a goal of raising $4,000 in the month of February. We raised $40 in the main show on that fundraiser, plus another 17, was it, from Super Chats. So really appreciate that. And of course, you know, if you want to donate and become a sustaining donor, because, you know, you saw in our main show, you know, all of our the number of sponsors that we have, and it is true that our listener support is the largest among the individual among the individual like sources of revenue. It's still only one of many. Right, so it's not the majority, unfortunately, of our revenue, and it would definitely make us more sustainable if that were the case. So, you know, if you wanted to do like a one-time donation of $20, $50, $100 for this month, and then become a sustaining donor at $1 a month, or $2 or $3 or $4 or $5, that would help immensely. That would help immensely. So you can donate to the fundraiser at tvlr.fm/expand, and you can become a sustaining member at tvlr.fm/donate. Dr. Weiner mentioned in the main show that she's going to be writing us a check. If you want to write us a check instead of donating online, some people are like that, and that's totally fine. You can send us a check to our P.O. Box. That is P.O. Box 147, Huntsville, Alabama 35801. That is P.O. Box 10047. 10047. That's the P.O. Box number. 10047, Huntsville, Alabama 35801. You can send us checks or letters. You want to send us, you know, that's just another way to get in touch with us. So send us money. That's what I'm trying to say. Send us money.
We sure do. Appreciate it, folks.
Absolutely. So let's talk about this this letter that we got from that came out last week from faith leaders in support of the Warrior Met coal miners who have been on strike now going into their 23rd month. They went on strike April 1st, 2021. So we are now only 2 months away from this being 2 years. Just an insanely long amount of time, and very just another example of ghoulish behavior from corporate America. And so there was a list of, actually literally hundreds of faith leaders, is my understanding. I've looked at it, and it's just columns of reverends and rabbis, and I think there's some imams on it. So, you know, lots of people supporting these coal miners. And in this letter, and I'll just read the letter in full. It's not terribly long, but bear with me as I read it. This is from that collection of faith leaders. As faith leaders from across the country, from a wide variety of faith traditions, we draw on our sacred scriptures which proclaim that each human being is created in the image of God and therefore deserving of dignity in all settings, especially the workplace. Clergy have met with the workers from Warrior Met Coal in Brookwood, Alabama. We know that over 800 United Mine workers have been on strike since April 1st, 2021, the longest strike in Alabama history. We are aware of the suffering to which the workers have been subjected. While working in extremely dangerous conditions, workers have made a myriad of sacrifices while the company went through a transition. Workers' wages, health care, benefits, pensions, and time off were reduced, saving the company over $1 billion. In fact, when compared to other United Mine Workers of America contracts, Warrior Met Coal has subjected its miners to work under the worst contract in our country, including mandatory 16-hour shifts. But then, as the company emerged from its transition in the last 3 years, the company has paid $1.6 billion in stock dividends to its Wall Street owners, and management has taken exorbitant bonuses. We believe the company has a moral obligation to provide fair compensation to the workers who created such wealth. The workers sacrificed greatly to stabilize the company, but now, in spite of huge profits, the company is destabilizing the workers by insisting on substandard wages, benefits, and working conditions. The company is causing the suffering of over 800 families who are not able to pay rent, eat properly, take care of their health, and buy school items for their children, resulting in workers enduring unnecessary hardships for the last 18 months. We understand that your company has stalled in negotiations, repeatedly insisting on egregious conditions that the workers rejected over a year ago, just as your largest shareholder, BlackRock, has urged you to end the strike with an agreement that is fair to your workers. We call on you to immediately negotiate a contract that ends the strike and honors your workers. Moreover, since coal is a natural resource given as a gift by God to humanity, your company is called to be a responsible steward of the earth's resources, reflecting that we are guardians of divine trust. We urge you to embrace the text from Micah 6, to do justice, love mercy, and walk humbly with your God by offering a fair contract and by ending the strike and the suffering of these workers. So a great letter from very many faith leaders. We appreciate their support for our coal miners here in Alabama, and we hope that this comes to an end sooner rather than later, because this has been a very, very difficult time for these folks. So,
yeah, I'm very happy to see the faith community put this letter out. I think that's exactly the kind of things that we have to do. We have to have community coalition in support of workers who are in struggle. So really appreciate them doing that. I hope that it reaches folks maybe who have not been reached yet about this struggle, whether they're unaware of it or maybe they are not really sure why they should be supporting these miners and the union. But yeah, again, that's the sort of stuff that I really love to see when the community can come together in coalition. And that's what I like to see out of faith communities, right? If you're going to be preaching the gospel and talking about loving your neighbor, well, let's really talk about it. So that's great to hear. And I hope that it's just another shot in the arm for the miners down there. It's inspiring to me, at least, that they have been able to fight for this long. It's a righteous cause. It's unfortunate that they're even having to have this fight because, as you mentioned, it's really the epitome of corporate greed and corporate malpractice in our society. This is a perfect example of what's broken in our country. A company such as this that can behave the way they've behaved. So shout out to the UMWA brothers and sisters down in Brookwood and to all of the faith community who has their back.
I wanted to reply to this in the chat because we got a question about this during double overtime last week that we didn't get to because it was just kind of a separate interview just about Adam. And this was Alex in the chat saying, I'm part of the Alphabet Workers Union. Very cool. And I wondered last week about our thoughts on the Google layoffs, besides the others in tech. And this will be pretty quick because I don't have a lot of thoughts about it, honestly. I mean, other than obviously that it's total BS. That these huge companies are laying off so many workers while at the same time giving stock buybacks to their shareholders. I saw yesterday on Twitter, More Perfect Union said that Meta, at the same time that it laid off 11,000 workers, is giving its, what was it? Let me just go to my Twitter to make sure that I get the right number. Because
I heard the same report on NPR Marketplace yesterday.
Yeah, it's just insane. Meta, at the same time that they laid off 11,000 workers, they announced $40 billion in stock buybacks. $40 billion with just. And I did this math because this is just $40 billion is an insane amount of money. And stock buybacks is just, I mean, this is a practice that was literally illegal before Ronald Reagan, right? This is something, the manipulation of stock prices was literally illegal before Ronald Reagan, okay? That's the because all it is lining investors' pockets with money. You're not creating anything. If Meta took 5%, Meta is Facebook, by the way, 5% of the money that they used to line the pockets of investors, they could have kept on every single one of the 11,000 workers at a salary of nearly $200,000 a year.
Wow.
5% of the $40 billion that they're spending on stock buybacks could have been used to keep on every single one of those workers at a salary of $200,000. They could have kept everybody on and then hired another 11,000 and still kept everybody in the six figures with just 5% of this money that's going to capitalists just to line pockets. It's insane. It's ludicrous, absolutely ludicrous. And you mentioned, Alex, in the chat that you are in the Alphabet Workers Union, and that is the only way to fight back against this kind of stuff, is for workers to take more control of the companies that they work for. That's the only way to fight back against this kind of nonsense.
Yeah, we have to build our power from the bottom up, and it's not just at Meta or just at Google. You know, there's clearly a coordinated effort across the tech industry, right? It's, to me, it just boggles imagination that you would think, oh, all of a sudden, all these companies just happen to need to cut their workforce by 10%, 15%, 12%. No, I believe this is capital ushering in discipline upon their workforce. And I think that, yeah, as you mentioned, the Alphabet Workers Union and other efforts, that's going to be critical to saving jobs and to saving people's livelihoods. You know, and maybe there's conversations to be had about, you know, Silicon Valley and, you know, the value in what they're doing as companies and the types of jobs they're creating, how, you know, maybe socially necessary or useful are some of these jobs. I get that. I don't think either of us are big fans of Silicon Valley, are like, you know, the companies there, like Google and Twitter and Facebook. I mean, there's a lot of evil shit coming out of there. I mean, I'm sorry. So I get that. But at the end of the day, you know, working class people are working class people, and the folks who are being impacted by these layoffs, you know, I just send out my love and solidarity and support for all of you, and I encourage you to, as you said, Jacob, organize with your coworkers to fight back.
Yeah, and it is worth noting, though, that while these layoffs are pretty pervasive in the tech industry, it does seem like, because there was a lot of talk before this jobs report that came out last week about how maybe this is indicative of like a coming recession. And there are other signs of recession besides these mass layoffs at tech companies.
Yeah, like the fact that the Federal Reserve seems pretty damn intensive and intentional about trying to start one, right?
Have you seen the new jobs report, though?
I have not. The one it just came out.
Yeah, it just came out. They were only anticipating like 95 or 195,000 jobs to be created in January. It was actually 517,000 jobs. So that's like 400,000 above expectations.
Right.
So
There's
and
just-
unemployment is the lowest it's been since like the 1950s. So lots of really conflicting news, but it does seem
Yeah.
like these layoffs seem to be isolated in the tech industry. So some good economic news despite the Fed's dogged insistence on trying to make that not be the case,
Right.
and the Democrats' dogged insistence on not doing anything about it. On not doing it, because remember, I want to just, every time we talk about the Fed, every time we talk about interest rates, I want people to remember that Trump, when they tried to raise interest rates under him, he pitched a fit and they stopped. Right? And so, Joe Biden should be pitching a damn fit about this, about the
Otherwise,
Fed trying to create a recession.
Otherwise, we're forced to believe that that's what you want, right? That
Yeah.
you're okay with this approach, and that's the approach that you want them to take. So I was not aware of that news with the latest jobs report, but definitely a lot of mixed signals out there.
Right.
Hopefully these layoffs are isolated just in the tech sector. But again, like I was saying earlier, there's arguments to be had about overvaluation of some of these tech companies, right? When their stock prices are just through the roof, and they're not necessarily correlated with anything tangible. But at the end of the day, when the workers are simply subject to whatever management wants, whatever ownership wants, that's when you have these situations when money is being used for stock buybacks at the same time that people are losing their livelihoods. Just a real slap in the face.
Yeah. Let's hit this Crowder clip really quick before we get Julia on, and then we have a couple other quick stories that we'll be able to get to either in between talking to Julia and Chris or after we talk to Chris, because these are kind of time sensitive stuff. But I did want to get to this Crowder stuff because it's pretty wild. And so, just to start off with, we all know what's been going on with the Crowder Daily Wire contract negotiation saga. We reviewed the contract that Crowder was offered with a union contract negotiator, so that's that we thought that was a pretty interesting contrast there. We also talked about Candace Owens attacking Amazon workers for some reason in her screed against Crowder, and so today. And this is probably going to be the last thing we talk about this with this saga. But I wanted to react to this because I found this Labor Day message that Steven Crowder had a few years ago, and it's interesting because the language he uses is just pretty different than what he's been using in this contract negotiation saga. And so just to remind people, a lot of this has been around free speech, but there was some issues that he took with the working conditions, and particularly the amount of work that he would have to do under this contract. And so, let's just remind people what he said about the amount of work he would have to do under this contract. Let's play that first Crowder clip.
Don't sign something that has another $100,000 daily penalty if it's not signed off on beforehand. You get hit by a car, you have a sick day, you could lose $100,000 a day. Hey, anyone wonder why there's burnout in this? Anyone wonder why you have kids come up and they leave and never to come back? You think if you had that kind of a penalty, you think if someone said, hey, we're going to penalize you $10,000 every day you miss coming into work, you think you'd be stressed? This is worse than the left.
And so, look, he's really upset about not being able, about the idea that if he misses a day that he was scheduled to work, he would get a $100,000 penalty. Now, a $100,000 penalty, that's interesting. I wonder what that is relatively, right? Like if I got a $100,000 penalty, that would mean that I am having to pay my employer for missing a day of work, right? That would be unfair, okay? And so Let's put that in context. The contract offer was for $50 million over 4 years. And so a $100,000 penalty for missing a scheduled day really doesn't seem that bad when you're talking about $50 million over 4 years. Not so bad. Also not so bad when you consider that the contract only had him working for 4 days a week. For 4 days a week, almost certain, working is producing 4 daily shows. One show every day, 4 days a week. That was the schedule. And so, obviously this isn't going to take him, 10 or 12 hours. These are not 4 10s or 4 12s. This is in all likelihood like 4 5s for somebody like him. Maybe some of the people on his production staff would be putting in 4 10s or something, but not Steven Crowder, right? Obviously. And so, and on top of that, the contract allowed for 4 weeks of paid vacation, which is something that not a lot of working people get. And so, he's talking about burnout because he has 4-day work weeks and a 4-week vacation. Obviously very silly. Very silly when you compare it to normal working people. The average salary in the United States is like $50,000. Most people, do not get 4 weeks of paid vacation. It's just, this is very silly stuff coming from him. And it's also silly when you compare it to his past rhetoric, which is what we're going to look at today. This is a video that he put out on Labor Day 3 or 4 years ago, and we're gonna play this clip in full and react to it. So let's go ahead and start that, Adam.
All right.
Oh, hello there. Allow me to express an unpopular opinion for a moment, if I may. Labor Day, as a national holiday, is a scam, and I hate it. No, I'm not going to try and steal your get-out-of-work-free day. You can rest easy enjoying your barbecue and beer while your boss ultimately picks up the slack to keep your pay stubs coming in, all because some arbitrary holiday was marketed to celebrate the working class and you now feel entitled to it.
Okay, stop there.
For picking
So
a man's
here's
pocket every first Monday of September.
Hold on just a second.
Seeing as I'm apparently the only one who knows.
Ooh.
He's going through all of this about like, oh, how bad it is that you have a day off, that you have a day off. For many people, it's unpaid, and for many people, actually, they're going to work today on Labor Day. Like a lot of people. I mean, what would you say, Adam, is the percentage of people that actually have to work on Labor Day? Like 50% of people, maybe?
Yeah, that's a good question.
It's
I'd like
lot.
to know. I mean, because obviously you're talking about the service industry, healthcare industry.
Yeah.
Right. There's so many folks that do have to work on Labor Day. I hate everything about the way this looks. It grosses me out. I'm not sure, what this look is about. Yeah.
But
Free Americans said Hugh Hefner. Yeah, that's
Right,
a good
yeah.
reference there. He's going for this Hugh Hefner look maybe, and his little rifle up there. Okay.
So he's, the idea that he's attacking working people who are not making millions of dollars every year for possibly getting 1 day off. While today, 4 years ago, he was doing that, and today he is crying and talking about how he would get burnout if he had to work 4 days a week and he couldn't just arbitrarily not work one of them with 4 weeks of paid vacation.
I mean, and according to him, if he missed work, his boss is going to have to work extra to pick up the slack just to make sure that pay stub comes through on time.
Yeah.
Might be worth mentioning that labor creates wealth, and that's where value comes from. But hey, it is what it is.
Yeah. Let's keep going.
Poor excuse for picking a man's pocket every first Monday of September. Seeing as I'm apparently the only one who knows that around here, allow me to explain my opinion. Now, Labor Day was created at a rare moment in history where unions actually served a purpose beyond bitching about six-figure benefit packages and determining which other members' tires they'd slash because of bullshit card check voting. See, that's because the Industrial Revolution, unlike the Agricultural Revolution, which preceded it, resulted in
stop
an
there.
economy...
Just stop there, because I want to remark again. Here he is. I mean, he's deriding union workers for, he said bitching about 6-figure payment packages, while he today is bitching about 7-figure payment packages, which, and just for the record, many union people do not make 6 figures. Probably most union workers do not make 6-figure.
And those who do, in most cases, do actually
work for it.
Hard work.
Yes.
Work that creates value for a capitalist, clearly, or they wouldn't be compensated as well as they are. I'm thinking about people who work in, manufacturing, people who do specialized trade work, hard work that required training, work that requires a level of skill and sacrifice, all of which are things I would not say about what would you call him? A content creator?
Yeah. Right.
And it's not to say there's not like work that's put into that. We put work into, bringing the show to the airwaves every week, but come on now.
Yeah. Oh, and actually Sid in the chat mentioned it's an 8-figure paycheck that he's bitching about. Not even a 7-figure. He's in the tens of millions of dollars that he was bitching about. And also Free American in the chat says, wasn't September chosen to get Labor Day away from May Day? And that's the actual factual thing, right? Is that Labor Day was chosen to be in September to get it away from the real actual radical militant history of labor in the United States and globally. Let's continue.
With a select few people at the top, and then a manual labor class in the factories who were working very long hours just to squeak out a living, sometimes 12 hours a day, 7 days a week.
Pause it! That's happening today! Today in union workplaces and in non-union workplaces. But that's what we've been talking about with this paper mill. And so, yes, some of these people get paid 6 figures, but they're working 6 to 7 days a week, 10, 12, 16 hours a day. Same thing with the coal mines. Same thing with these Kellogg's workers. And, he is attacking these people.
Yeah, this is an old trope that folks trot out all the time when they're bashing unions.
They used to be needed, but now everybody's got it so good.
Right. Back in the old days, maybe there was a place for them, but, we don't really need them anymore. And my question is, what exactly has changed? Because last I checked, whether the year's 1880 or 1980 or 2023, we have a socio-economic system designed around the pursuit of private profit, and that's how our production is operated. And you have capitalists who are trying to squeeze as much as they can from their labor force. And the fact that there are some differences now between now and the Industrial Revolution is a testament to the struggle and the victories of working class people coming together to extract concessions from the boss and from the state. It's a pitiful argument because, as you point out, anything that happened back then, just about you could point to today, whether that's the continued existence of child labor, the continued overwork of folks, the continued poverty of folks, the continued inequality. In fact, the inequality now rivals that of the Gilded Age. I'll party foul.
Yeah.
That was an actual moment in history, unlike the fabricated one today from entitled leftist socialists who bitch that the American dream is more out of reach than ever because they might have to work a double shift at their retail job to pay off their gender studies degree that they think the taxpayer should ultimately subsidize. Also, notice that I said manual.
It is more difficult to work a double shift at a retail place than to do whatever it is that Steven Crowder is doing right here that he's going to be making 8 figures for. Okay.
Yeah, and also statistically, the American dream is very much dead for a large number of people in this country, and it's not because of a gender studies degree.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right.
If you're not sure about that, just look into social mobility in this country.
Also look at who holds student debt. The majority, the largest single degree holders, the largest percentage of union of college debt is held by nurses. So, yeah.
Laborers and not working class. Because the idea that someone who owns that factory, or today someone who owns a business or happens to be an independent contractor, is not working is absurd, insulting, and ironically, anti-intellectual. Think about it. The only difference between a lawyer, a doctor, an investor, or independent business owner, and the working class, as is the current nomenclature, is that the former simply work with their minds instead of their bodies. Does that mean that their work is any less valuable? I thought the left had the corner on intelligentsia. Or does that only apply to modern humanities majors who posit theories and philosophies that needn't yield results in the real world? But hey,
okay, we can
that
just stop for there just really quickly. I don't know what he's talking about, the modern nomenclature of working class, but the distinction between the working class and the owning class is whether or not you work to make a living, right? So whether you work with your brain or your hands or whatever, if your subsistence comes from wages you receive for hours you sell, hours of your time that you sell to a business, you are a worker. You are a worker. You're in the working class. The thing that makes you not in the working class is if your money comes from owning. So small business owners, they might perform labor. Some of their work might come from labor time, wages and things like this. But but also some of their money comes from profits, just from owning. And the larger your business, the more that percentage of income creates for you. And this, that's the distinction. Whether or not your money comes from owning or working, that's the distinction.
To a T. After all, what gives the working class or proletariats the rights to have the government violently seize businesses and means of production from others outside of the fact that the very cerebral work required to create it in the first place is simply not valued in a communist society? While we're speaking of value, let's go back to the value of time. Again.
Okay, so I want to keep this moving, but I just want to point out that capitalist governments sometimes do things violently. I'll just leave it at that.
Today, most Americans are horrified to learn that in the time of the Industrial Revolution, many people were working 12-hour days without breaks. Because in the age of today, the average 34-hour work week, who would ever consider putting themselves through that? And that's where we come full circle. Today, while you enjoy your melanoma and corn beer, there are still plenty of people who work those kinds of hours without the benefit of a labor union. They're called business owners.
Okay, all right, yeah. No. I'm sorry, but no, that doesn't count. I thought for a second there he was about to say something real, that, there are people who are working their ass off and they don't have labor unions. And
maybe agricultural workers.
That's exactly who came to my mind. People who are sun up to sundown, picking crops in the heat, in the cold. That disturbs me, but I'm going to keep it going.
People you'll inevitably find time to vilify today between your hot dog eating contest and waking up in a boozy puddle of your own filth on some stranger's lawn. Because
also, that sounds a lot like projection.
Yeah, I have never once had a Labor Day like that. I've never once had a Labor Day and it's also worth mentioning the average 34-hour week. I don't know where he gets that from, but it's also...
I would be more than happy, though, for us to reduce the full-time work week to 34 or 30 hours or lower, but I don't know where he's getting that either. We've got a lot of discussion in the chat that there's a video clip of him getting punched by a union guy. Please send that to us. I would love to see that today.
Oh, have you not seen that?
I don't think I have.
Really?
I stay away.
Oh, dude,
I don't see. You know more about these creeps than I do. I don't.
Dude.
I purposely try not to know who these people are.
It's big.
I'd need to see that video.
You were taking the day off to play drunken lawn darts. They were likely working to make sure that the lights are still on. Someone has to make sure that you can find your way when you tardily stumble in on Tuesday looking for the Alka-Seltzer. Listen, enjoy your silly day off and have fun. My only point here is that Labor Day just highlights the gross mass generalizations that come from the left in the 21st century. Even though they accuse the right of being racist at every opportunity possible, it is they who exclusively separate and view people through the prism of sex, race, age, and yes, socioeconomic status. This classism is just another way to divide and conquer, turn brother against brother,
Classism.
and to make you think that you're somehow owed something that only Big Brother can provide. So enjoy your Labor Day and enjoy your weekends off and 8-hour work days for that matter. And yes, like
How
you'll see in
generous.
all the social media trends today, you can in part thank a union for those luxuries. Just know that they're afforded to you because of someone who enjoys none of them. Someone who doesn't have a standard weekend and has likely gone years of working tireless hours and borrowing money just to make payroll. So, okay, for your time off, benefits, and silly little end of summer holiday, thank a union. As for your job and the ability to provide for you and yours, thank a business owner.
Yeah, that's pretty amazing.
Jesus Christ.
I mean, it's just absolutely wild to believe that, you know, that describes the majority of business owners, that this is like an accurate depiction of, you know, the owning class as just these workaholics.
Right.
It's absurd. It's
I mean,
absurd.
there's basically a handful of families that control almost all the wealth in this country.
Right.
And you want me to feel bad for them.
Yeah.
You know, there's a lot of terms we could use for a person like that.
And the idea that he used classism to describe antagonism towards the owning class, you know.
Class struggle is a reality. Whether
Right.
you want to name it, whether you want to talk about it, it's just a reality of a society in which there's hierarchy and unequal distribution of wealth and power.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter if you want to acknowledge it. It doesn't matter if you want to talk about it or not. It's happening. So,
And it's worth just remembering that today Steven Crowder is crying about not being able to willy-nilly take a day off from his 4-day work week, from his $8 million contract. And 3 years ago, he was admonishing working people for taking Labor Day off. So that's the thing. But speaking of class struggle, Julia Rock is in the Zoom with us today.
I'm really excited about this. This article was great.
Yes.
I loved everything about it, starting with the title, Fear and Loathing Among the Union Busters. Big Hunter S. Thompson fan myself, so I dug the reference. And it was a pleasant surprise. Like I just happened to be checking my email early in the morning and came across it.
Dude,
it was one of the
it
first
was-
things that came across my inbox that morning.
It was popping on Twitter. Everybody was like, I mean, my feed was filled with it for days. People like,
that's why I count on you,
Yeah.
Jacob, to tell me what's popping on Twitter.
This was popping, absolutely popping on Twitter. People like posting screenshots of different parts of the article. It's funny. I feel like I read half the article before I ever actually opened the link because so much of it is good and quotable and like, wow, that's an interesting bit there. That half the article was posted on Twitter, from different people before I ever actually read it. So Julia Rock with The Lever News. Thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us about this piece that you wrote.
I'm so glad to join. Thanks.
So, what was the impetus for the, what made you think about writing about, well, what is it about? I guess you can explain to the audience what the article was about, and then what made you want to write about it.
Yeah, so this is an article about sort of a seemingly maybe unusual gathering of restaurant executives and basically their lawyers, their corporate lawyers at a hotel in Atlanta, Georgia last October. And they were brought together by the legal arm of the National Restaurant Association, which maybe after the Chamber of Commerce, but on its own terms is probably the most anti-worker lobbying group in America. And it was sort of an especially unusual event because the keynote speech was given by Jennifer Abruzzo, the top enforcer of labor law in the federal government. She's the general counsel of the National Labor Relations Board. So there were certainly some moments of, I guess, class conflict, as you would say, at this gathering. And I wrote about it because it's very rare to have the opportunity to hear, lawyers from Jackson Lewis talk union busting strategy. And sort of that's exactly what I was writing about.
And so, just to underscore, this isn't the main part of your article, but this is some other reporting that kind of came out in parallel. Really, some of the gross class antagonism coming from the top. There was a New York Times report about how the National Restaurant Association is using fees from safety certificates that that these restaurants make their employees get to fund anti-worker electoral campaigns. Can you explain that? Can you explain some of that reporting for us?
Yeah, so this is just completely crazy. So the National Restaurant Association basically runs these food safety certification classes through this business they run called ServSafe, and workers in many states are required to pay for and take these food safety certification classes to be able to work in restaurants. The National Restaurant Association is using the revenue it collects from workers through ServSafe to lobby against higher wages and paid sick leave for those same workers. It's extremely cynical and evil, and it's not really a common way for a lobbying group to fund itself. Oftentimes they're just funded from fees from their members, which are, corporations, or from big donations from, rich people who hate working people.
Yeah, I almost have to give it to them for being so devious to figure out a way to make the very people they're attacking pay for the attack. And like, I was ServSafe certified previously, working in the restaurant industry. I know for a fact that there are public school students in Alabama at the K-12 at the high school level who are receiving these ServSafe certifications through their classes at school, right? Through culinary arts and home ec and things like that. And, you just think about how much money is being funneled into that, even so in this case, we potentially have taxpayers subsidizing this money, which is being used, as you point out, to fight working people who work in the restaurant industry, to prevent unionization, to fight minimum wage increases and other labor laws. So, I just wanted to chime in with that it's happening all over, and anyone who's ever worked in the restaurant industry is, probably pretty familiar with that ServSafe certification. And now I can't look at them on the walls of these restaurants when I walk in. I look at them and I automatically am now thinking about what is happening behind the scenes with that money.
And so, what was the what was the main what were some of the main thrusts, some of the main topics of this conference? What were some of the main points of discussion during these presentations?
Which, by the way, to me, what you described, it sounds like a Legion of Doom meeting.
Yes.
It sounds like the world's greatest supervillains all went to Vegas.
Well, so looming large the entire time is, of course, the fact that baristas at Starbucks stores have won unions at nearly 280 stores in just over the past year. So if you're an executive running a chain restaurant, like, you're thinking about Starbucks. The other thing, of course, sort of in the air, was that the entire thing had started with this speech, again, from a labor law enforcer, Jennifer Abruzzo. So on the minds of everyone speaking was, I think, the fact that, workers in restaurants and, of course, across industries in the U.S. are sort of increasingly outspoken, not just about issues that sort of directly, impact their working conditions day to day, like wages and scheduling time off. These are things that workers have been sort of at historic levels in recent years striking over in the past couple of years, but also sort of broader, social and political issues, or at least this is sort of how the lawyers and restaurant people speaking saw it, that right now the American workforce is a lot more outspoken about social and political issues at work than they had previously been. And I think, it seemed to me, based on what everyone is saying, the reason that they're sort of anxious about that type of speech in the workplace is that, like, as soon as you have workers, talking to one another about political issues, it could lead to them talking to one another about issues like wages, scheduling, paid sick time, and of course, unions.
And, you mentioned the speech that she gave. You quote her in part saying, "I'm not nickel and diming workers." And then somebody coming up after them saying, quote, "Hang in there, don't despair. It's going to get better from here." Like, the idea that, oh no, you're going to have to obey the law. We're going to try to make it a little bit better for you for the rest of the conference, right? We're going to presumably give you some tips and tricks for, getting around the law, right?
I mean, it's funny because when workers say, during union campaigns or at any point, like, we're forming a union and sort of on the one side there's the worker and then on the other side there's the bosses will say, "Oh no, we're a family, it's not like that." And then of course you have at this conference, as you point out, this top executive at Golden Corral, a major restaurant chain, saying like, okay, on the one side you have labor law and the enforcers of labor law, and then on the other side you have us. Like they're just spelling it out quite clearly.
Mm-hmm. And one of the things, and something else that they pointed out that you mentioned in your article is how that you mentioned up at the top as well, is this changing dynamic that the workforce has. And one of the people mentioned in one of their speeches that he was, you said that he was happily recounting how in the old days when he started as, at the bottom, he said, "We were doing all this stuff that you're not supposed to. As a miner, walking around with big knives and shoving raw sausage into a meat grinder, and we can't do that anymore." And, so like, what was the feeling among the audience about this new, this new workforce that they perceive as being more interested in being, in being respected and not having children work and, having safety standards and things like this?
Well, and yeah, so one sort of relevant piece of information is that the workforce in restaurants, as anyone who's eaten in a restaurant knows, is younger than the workforce in a lot of other sectors. And so tropes about young people and about Gen Z people were sort of constantly being thrown around. But sort of the description of this workforce and this generation of workers is that, it's a workforce that wants things to be very easy. There was a quote from a Jackson Lewis lawyer saying they want everything to be light and fluffy. This is sort of the snowflake generation. And, one thing that was interesting that the speaker you mentioned saying we did all these things we weren't supposed to, is he was sort of referencing like how low the wages were when he started out in the restaurant industry. But the wages he referenced are actually higher than the federal minimum wage right now. So it was like, on the one hand, there was this sense that the workforce is very different than it used to be. It wants things to be easy. Things used to be tough in restaurants. Now they're light and fluffy. And yet, thanks to lobbying efforts by the National Restaurant Association, the federal minimum wage, when you account for inflation, is lower than, it was back when these people might have been young people working in restaurants. And the tipped minimum wage, the sub minimum wage of $2.13 an hour that tipped workers make, has not moved in 30 years. So there's both the sense that workers now are softer than they used to be, and yet their wages are much worse than the wages of the generation speaking at this conference were when they might have been working in restaurants.
Exactly. And that goes into, and it's amazing because you point out the fact that the tip minimum wage hasn't changed in in 30 years. I worked as a waiter for $2.13 an hour. And I remember being, basically cajoling my boss into giving me $1 an hour raise. And so I was making $3 an hour as a waiter my last year. And I was the only person, this is what he told me, I was the only person in the restaurant to have ever even asked for a raise right at that point. And it's just amazing, the idea that the law is so minimal that these bosses, corporations have to adhere to, and yet they don't do it. They still routinely skirt minimum wage requirements. They skirt overtime requirements and all of this stuff. And so because of this, plaintiffs' attorneys will go after these corporations for wage and hour litigation. And this is another thing that you mentioned in your article, saying that, they caricatured plaintiffs' attorneys as the Dr. Evil from Austin Powers in one of their slides for going after for getting these workers wages that they earned. They had plaintiffs' attorneys caricatured as Dr. Evil in one of their presentations for this.
I mean, I'm so glad you brought this up, because it was just, I think, one of the most wild things that happened at the conference. But yeah, basically, this lawyer is saying like, oh, you might be the subject of a wage and hour claim. And why? Because plaintiffs' attorneys are evil, and they're going to be looking for wages that you've stolen from your workers. And that sort of entire presentation about wage and hour issues, it's exactly the point you're making about how the bar is so low. I mean, $2.13 an hour for the tip minimum wage. And yet so much of the presentation was about periods of time, like 5 or 10 minutes, in which these lawyers are advising the audience on whether or not you can pay your workers, the sub minimum wage, or whether you're going to be on the hook for the regular minimum wage of $7.25 an hour. I mean, they're literally litigating periods of time that are like the difference between a 20 and 30-minute lunch break, and whether or not you're going to have to compensate your workers for that time.
And the idea, like, how is it, because it just seems to me that so much of this is just really, really so ghoulish as to, it's difficult to see how you could not get more productivity and more loyalty and, from your employees if you just did right by them. Like instead of trying to nickel and dime workers for like, oh, can we get by with only giving them a 20-minute break, or should we give them a 30-minute break? Like, why not just not only make sure you don't violate the law, but do a little bit better? And if you're just a little bit better, you'll be like in the top tier of restaurants, and it seems like you could attract talent. Like, why is that? Was that ever at any point? Was there ever a presentation on like, oh, here's productivity gains that we got at this restaurant by treating our workers like people?
No. The short answer is no. The little bit longer answer is that, one thing that did come up that didn't really make it into the article, but a few people mentioned, was it's hard to recruit workers in restaurants right now. And this is true. The jobs, as we've been talking about, they don't pay very well. They can be really brutal. And especially, during COVID, when a lot of, restaurant chains were declining to offer paid sick time, when they were, sort of lobbying against efforts to provide paid sick time to workers, lots of people left the industry. So right now it's challenging, to recruit workers to work, especially in fast food restaurants. And this came up a couple of times in the context of lawyers. And I think it was a McDonald's executive talking about, basically how much political speech to allow in the workplace. And sort of what they were basically saying is like, if you seem to have a slightly more generous policy around, not restricting your workers from being open about their political views, like that might be one way to recruit workers. I didn't hear anybody say, if you offer better wages, you'll be able to recruit workers more easily. I did do some reporting last year on the National Restaurant Association, lobbying against raising the federal minimum wage to 15 an hour and getting rid of the sub minimum wage. And I did a few stories about how a Denny's executive told investors on an earnings call that actually in states where the minimum wage goes up, Denny's tends to be better off because their customers are making more money and so they can spend more money at Denny's. So I think to your point, like, it can be very good for the bottom line to pay your workers more or treat them better, but that's not often something that these executives seem to want to do.
It's just so bizarre to me because, and this, I think this really kind of puts the light of the idea that, the capitalists are just like rigidly rational and logical and purely profit-seeking machines, because so much of this is about power. I mean, this is outside of the restaurant industry, but down here in Alabama, if the Warrior Met Coal, their miners with the UMWA have been on strike for nearly 2 years now, and in just the first, I think, 15 months, after the first 15 months, the UMWA put out calculations showing that if the mines had been operating at full capacity, which they've not been this whole time, they've had some people cross the picket line and some people come from different areas and work in this mine who hadn't before, but they're not operating at full capacity. They're operating at 20 to 40% or something. If they'd been able to operate at full capacity, they'd have been able to put out $1 billion more worth of coal, and a significant amount more of profit. But they haven't done that because they don't want to give up this control. They don't want to allow the union to win, and they don't want to, so it's in that case. And in so many of these cases with the restaurant industry, it's not just about profit. It's about power, right?
And, this is a remarkable thing I come across all the time reporting on, corporations and corporate lobbying groups, is they will lobby against things that would be better for their bottom lines. If it means handing more powers to an agency that oversees them, if it means, voluntarily recognizing a union, if it means raising wages, it can be empirically true that those things will be better for business and they will still oppose them.
And they even mention, one of the things that they mention in this is one of these union busting attorneys said the number one reason for people going to unions is not money. It never has been. It's always been respect. And so, some of this respect and money aren't exactly totally divergent things. Like if you're only paying me $2 an hour, it's difficult for me to kind of wrap my head around the idea that you respect me, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's quite funny to present those things as completely mutually exclusive because they most certainly aren't. And the other thing that was sort of funny about that lawyer, saying unions aren't about money, they're about respect, is she didn't really offer any sort of tactic to prevent unions from forming in workplaces that had anything to do with actually being more respectful towards your workers. So while they don't seem willing to offer more money, it's not even clear that they're willing to offer more respect either.
Right. And I was going to say that same thing, that, they're recognizing some truth there. And Jacob and I have had this experience. You talk to any folks in the labor movement, that's a pretty common thing for folks to say. It's about respect. It's about the way I'm treated on the job. It's about more than just the paycheck. That is, a pretty common sentiment. But at no point, do they ever come up with an idea of, I don't know, what if we were nice to people? What if? Like, what if we gave people time off when they needed
Right.
it? You know, what if we did these things that maybe don't even really cost a whole lot, but would just, you know, be a nice gesture, make people feel valued? You know, and most, you know, I guess when the union campaign rolls around is when they might throw the pizza party, you know, and that kind of thing, or, you know, bring in balloons or something. But, yeah, I think that's pretty remarkable to be able to, like, correctly recognize it and speak it out, you know, in front of the room, but have no offer of how you might accomplish that, of treating people with respect or responding to that, you know, perceived grievance. Even, you know, in their minds, as I'm sure it's perceived, right? They just feel disrespected because they're, you know, sensitive snowflakes or whatever. Okay, well, you know, how are you going to respond to that reality? And it seems it's just raw force and, you know, political lobbying and hoping that there's enough folks who are exploitable to come in and replace the people who leave.
And, you know, so you mentioned that they identify like respect as something that is operative in this. And if they're saying respect is operative and it's important, but they're not identifying ways that you can make people show you, or that you can show people that you respect them, like, you know, making their wage livable, like giving them adequate breaks, time off, or, you know, any sort of autonomy in their workplace and in their work, and to stave off union campaigns, which is really kind of the ultimate thing about this, or a big thing. And so what are some of the ways that this conference said you should, you know, if they're saying respect, but they're not doing these things that workers are talking about, what are their alternatives that they were trying to put forward in this conference to stave off unions?
I would say there were two main points to sort of their union avoidance, as they would say, or union busting, as anyone else would say, proposals. And sort of the first was because of what I had been saying before about the perception of, you know, Gen Z as this more socially engaged or politically active generation. What multiple lawyers sort of suggested was giving workers the opportunity to participate in what might seem to the workers like real opportunities, you know, to talk about social and political issues in the workplace, but to sort of make sure those things were happening in a very controlled way where you know, the employer was setting the terms. So particular suggestions that came up were literally like setting up a sustainability committee for workers to be on, and then letting them like do their sustainability things, and then, you know, report back to the rest of the workplace about how great their sustainability efforts were. So this sort of
channel unrest into a meaningless committee.
Yes, exactly. So that was sort of the key point to much of the union avoidance, was like give them opportunities to sort of think they have a say in something meaningful, but have it like not be very real. And then sort of the other thing underlying it all was like, don't say anything anti-union and don't make it seem like you're trying to stop the union campaign, because, you know, the American public is more pro-union than it has been in a very long time. And so doing explicit union busting, you know, they would say you might end up going viral for something you don't want on social media. Something you say might end up in a news headline. Your workers are going to get mad at you. So don't do anything. You know, don't say what you're doing is trying to stop the union.
Right. Another, and I think, you know, we're getting close to wrapping up, but I did just want to mention this because this was a really kind of fascinating bit that definitely traveled far on Twitter, and that is all of these people talking about how their kids are into it. You know, the discussion around the children of these union busters being pro-union. You know, in a discussion about how in the news unions are, you know, one of Jackson Lewis's colleagues, you say, are saying, who's reading this stuff? My kids. I have an 18-year-old. My kids are into it. And there was another section where this union buster says that their kid came up to them with an opportunity to do like a show and tell thing, kind of like,
Like speak to the class
Yeah,
at
like
school.
speak to the class. And you would be great, Mom, because you're a great public speaker, but you're a union buster, so you can't do it. And, so she says, like, I don't union bust. I focus on positive employee relations. So, I mean, she can't even speak candidly to her children. And that's, like, fascinating.
I mean, no, that's really mind blowing. Sort of both that she would sort of admit it and the audience would laugh. Like, are you all having sort of similar experiences with your children? Is that why you're all laughing? But yeah, sort of the fact that like you would be presented at home, with shame from your kids about what your profession is, and instead of being like maybe deeply ashamed about that, you would just sort of try to pull the same tactics on them as you are to this annoying Gen Z workforce you deal with on a day-to-day basis.
I don't like to pathologize politics very much, but I can't help but wonder if some of the sentiments they were expressing about Gen Z and millennials was a reflection of perhaps some of their own strained relationships with their own children and grandchildren who won't call them anymore because they do evil shit for a living. Maybe that's just me. I don't know. I'm not Freud or anything, but that's just my thoughts.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it is. I just found that super fascinating because, like, how is it that you have a child that you have, been talking about your work with, presumably, and why would you not just why would you not just say, like, yeah, I'm a union buster, unions are bad? Like, I don't know. It's bonkers to me that you can't even be candid with your own family about what it is that you do. I think that is really, that's almost, it seems to me, indicative of some amount of shame that they can't even admit to their family what it is that they're doing. It's pretty wild.
And I honestly think people who lie constantly as a profession can't turn that off.
Yeah.
I mean, and I think that's part of why you see, so many politicians with personal scandals and things like that is because people who are pathological liars and who lie, as a means of survival, they're not going to just turn that on and turn that off easily.
Right.
Perhaps some can, but not all the time and not forever.
Yeah. So, Julia, we really appreciate you taking the time. Where can people find your work and talk to us about The Lever and what y'all are doing over there?
Yeah, the Lever is just a great investigative news publication that everyone should be reading. We cover all things labor, politics, corporations, climate. We're at levernews.com and we're funded by our readers. So a lot of publications now are funded by billionaires or big foundations or corporate advertisements, but we're funded by the people who read us. So we really need subscribers. Subscriptions are pretty cheap. I think it's $5 to $8 a month right now. And you can find us at levernews.com or at levernews on Twitter. I'd really encourage everyone to subscribe. We rely on you all to keep doing stories like this.
Julia, thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
This is great.
You've got a subscriber from me for sure. So.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
All right.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
Yeah,
All right.
I second that. I also subscribe to The Lever, and I'm very glad they put out a citizen's guide to like investigative journalism, which I found really cool to just engage people on, like, what is it that investigative reporters do to kind of arrive at the truth and hold people accountable in government. And I like that. I like the idea of getting your readers involved and kind of training them up on how to go do these things and ask these questions and look for certain documents and do that research. So yeah, I'm glad I subscribed. I'm glad I ran across the article. Really appreciate it. So the link is in the chat. If you have not read Julia's article, definitely check it out.
Yep. Have we got Chris on the line?
Yeah, we do have Chris on the line. We just got a jam-packed show today.
Jam-packed, segment to segment. We are moving right along, and we have now on the line Chris Townsend, former international organizing director for the Amalgamated Transit Union. He was also staff for UE, the United Electrical Workers Union, and
returning guest, friend of the show.
Returning guest, friend of the show. One of the big reasons that William Z. Foster has had another day in the sun, so to speak. So, Chris, we really appreciate you coming on to talk to us again.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I am all of that and then some. And, I appreciate the chance to talk about this strike. It's everybody says that every strike is important, and this one certainly is to the transit union. And it's an unnecessary strike, but this is sadly what the world has turned into with the way that the politicians manage these things. Maybe I'll just describe briefly what's at play in the strike, or who, what, when, where.
Yes, absolutely. We want to start with that. Who, what, when, where, and where are we at right now? I know that the strike has been going on for a few weeks, and then you personally have some background on the strike. You've been involved with some of these workers before this strike began, so I'm interested in going to that. But yeah, let's start off with what is going on in Loudoun County, Virginia.
Yeah, this is, thank you. This is the Amalgamated Transit Union. It is the largest of the bus and rail transit union. And in any event, it's out in Loudoun County, Virginia, which is the far west suburbs of Washington, D.C. And it's an area that has totally been transformed in the last several decades from an old, sleepy, southern horse country run by reactionary Democrats and eventually Reagan Republicans. But it has shifted politically in a much more liberal direction. And it's also grown immensely. And the cost of living out there has gone through the roof. It's a bedroom community for a lot of very wealthy commuters that come down to Washington, D.C. So anyway, it never had a transit system 30 years ago, but it over time developed one, and it now has 140 workers plus management and whatever else they pay. So it's become a substantial operation run by Loudoun County. And in any case, when I was the organizing director of ATU, I went out there, I guess it was 2016. The original group were the commuter bus operators. That was the largest group, and it brought the white collar commuters down to Washington, D.C. And in any case, I went out and met with them in 2016 because they had been in another union. The other union kicked them out. It was a totally dissatisfying experience. I won't go into it, but it was a broken situation. But there was still core of workers that wanted a real union. So I went out and rejected all those who poo-pooed, oh, you can't organize these people. They didn't want to belong to that union. They won't belong to this union. And it was nonsense. I thought, no, I'll go out there. And back then it was run by a different French multinational company called Transdev, thoroughly contemptible anti-union company, separate from the current company, which I'll get to in a second. But in any case, we had to go through one hell of a fight with the Transdev Corporation, including the company setting up an old-fashioned company union to try to keep us out. Well, it didn't work. We kept at it. We defeated them, organized an ATU group up there with Transdev, and managed to bargain a decent first contract. And we're doing our thing. The pandemic comes. Well, the pandemic, as everyone can imagine, reduced the number of commuters dramatically. But it also was the time when the county was rebidding the contract for the company that was going to operate it. It's all private. It's a public agency, but it's a private company. So what do? They do their usual routine, which does not include due diligence about the company that's putting in the too good to be true low bid, which in this case was the Keolis Corporation, which is essentially the French state railways, SNCF. It's a long established company, big, huge in France, highly unionized in France. And then they set up shop over here a number 20 years ago or so, and they're trying to put their own footprint in the United States. So here in Washington, D.C., they have two commuter groups and transit groups, Loudoun County and one down in Prince William County. So in any case, this Keolis Corporation lands on the scene. We had dealt with this corporation in a few other places, including myself. I had to go out to Las Vegas for a couple of months to settle the ATU contract with Keolis there. Keolis operates the strip buses that you see when you're out there doing your tourism. But in any case, Keolis comes on the scene. The liberal Democrats who run the county now, and I guess we'll say we're grateful for that. It's better than reactionary Republicans or worse. But those folks, again, not having done any due diligence about this situation, we essentially reached the point where we predicted this strike. They allowed this company, Keolis, onto the property, allowed them to bid low, and then we go into immediately upon in 2021 and early 22 when Keolis assumed the service from the other company, the other French company. They immediately attacked the workforce and refused to recognize the union, and we were off to the races. And what took place then was a full year or more of fight to just save the union. The employer was determined to combine the unit commuter group with a new and growing group of paratransit workers who had been unorganized. Even though we represented a majority of them, they refused to recognize us. Unfair labor practice charges piled up to the ceiling. The workers were harassed and aggravated with this. Here they had a union. Now here comes a new company. And no care was taken by the contracting politicians to ensure that their union would continue. So we had a life and death fight just to save the union. Well, we prevailed. We beat that back. And our group then was the combined group, which is who's on strike now. It's commuter coach, paratransit, mechanics, some other folks. And from day one, Keolis had laid out, at least they were honest, is that our goal is to destroy the union. And we survived through this, what was then the second union election that we had to win, and these workers had to endure to preserve the union. But then now the company essentially says, hey, this is our last and final offer, take it or leave it. The workers said, screw you, we're going to strike. And we've been on strike out there now for more or less a month. And it's been, it's always a difficult thing for workers. These are not highly paid workers. That's the problem. They're grossly underpaid compared to their peers here in the greater Washington, D.C. area. There's an awful lot of issues besides wages, health insurance. Imagine that in 2023, we still have workers who are, lodging health insurance problems as and the cost of health insurance as one of their strike issues. So we've been out for about a month, and I guess I'll wrap up, and then I know you guys want to have a discussion. This group of Democrats that run the county have sat on their hands for a month now. Now here they employ this corporation. They're the political leadership of the county that actually have a contract with this corporation to do this work. The company is not performing the work, and by that contract, they have the ability to penalize this company. Well, they won't do it, and they're not doing it. And it's shameful, and this goes on over and over again throughout the transit industry, where you have the contracting political agency, which is really in cahoots with the company that they hired. I think what needs to happen here in Loudoun County is a significant investigation of this transit agency and its senior staff who are in cahoots with this corporation. They're not managing this corporation. They're cooperating with this corporation, not invoking the terms of their own contract, and therefore extending the length of the strike, because the corporation is not experiencing the kind of pinch that it would, like the members are, when the strike comes on. So that may be a little bit of inside baseball for folks, but
well, no, I don't think that's inside baseball. I think that's incredibly important. And what are the elected officials who are responsible for managing this corporation, are they giving any sort of justification for just ignoring the contract, the terms of the contract that they have with this entity?
Yeah. I'm retired now, although I live here, and I've been in touch with workers up there. I mean, I lived with these workers for years. I knew them. I helped beat back both the attacks that I mentioned. And the ATU has local 869 staff and international union staff working on this thing. But from a distance, and what I've read in the media and what I've gleaned from speaking to people on, that I'm acquainted with involved in this, that there's no explanation for why they won't invoke these penalties. Now, we know that one of the senior transit agency spokespersons repeated the baloney that we hear other places, which is, oh, we can't get involved in the negotiations. Well, that's not quite true. What he's saying is we won't get involved. We're too lazy, too afraid, too anti-union to get involved in this. And I should stop and say, guys, the dilemma that we have here, when you go all the way back to the beginning, is that these transit agencies have to hire a professional staff to run their own system. And they hire a senior staff from all over the country, very professional people, very learned in many cases, but incredibly anti-union in most cases. The business schools in the United States, the whole industry is anti-union. They have no respect for the workers' right to organize. At best, they'll consider the union sort of a necessary, an evil that they can't unload and get rid of. So as this slice of the transit agency management has become permeated with this anti-union bigotry, worse and worse with every year, it doesn't really matter who the political leadership is that's managing them. I mean, the effect to the Loudoun County workers here is the same, whether they're Democrats, as we now see, or Republicans. We would have fully expected a Republican political agency, for instance, the old Loudoun County regime would have handled it exactly the same. Don't invoke the contract, don't penalize the company, give them some slack. They'll starve the workers out. The union will either die down or go away. Well, we happen to have liberal Democrats who say the right things. But look, guys, we have a president of the United States, Joe Biden. What a sham. He's the most pro-union president. Well, he uses the word. That's something new. He'll show up at a union event. He'll take a lot of money from the labor movement. You could make the case he was probably elected because of the labor movement. But what did he do with the railroad workers here most recently? Mercilessly, cynically crushed their strike over an issue that is a basic human right. I mean, that's another discussion. But I mean, when you have the top Democrats setting the standard for complete, anti-unionism, why would we expect it all the way down the chain in Loudoun County that the Democratic Party there and the leadership would suddenly want to defy that and say, no, we're going to vigorously defend the rights of these workers and their union? It doesn't work that way in the United States. And any trade unionist who's been at it for at least 2 weeks already knows this. The Democrats at best are an unreliable occasional ally, but we're trapped. I mean, we have no allies elsewhere, so we take what we can get. So anyway, the agency, to my knowledge, as of late last week, still had not invoked any of these penalties. And this is a strike that will continue until some of this justice is won by these workers. We've defeated this in other strikes here in the area, because maybe I'll mention that the transit union here should be recognized for something, although the current leadership of the union seems oblivious to this. But in the period of time that I was the organizing director, we organized 13 new transit units in Northern Virginia. Now, everybody knows there's people running all over creation, yelling up and down, jumping up and down, organize the South, organize in the South. I mean, you guys hear this all the time. I'm all for it, just like you are. But we've done it in ATU. We've also organized several other transit agencies in other parts of the South. But this is what it means to get out here and do this. And then, of course, once you organize workers, you have to bargain a contract and you have to fight the tough fights. And this is a tough fight because, the ATU is a very Democratic party, an extremely Democratic party-oriented union. And now they find themselves on strike against a political leadership that is Democrat and is hiding out, best I can tell, hoping that it will resolve one way or the other and they won't have to get involved. Well, tough.
I'm wondering if you could talk to us about some of the some of how this this transit system was unionized, because, you know, it's pretty impressive to the idea that this went from an unorganized unit of workers in the South that the union that now represents them, some of the international leadership was saying, no, you know, there's really no use in organizing these folks, to now these people have won 2 elections and are on a month-long strike, which going on strike at all, agreeing to go on strike, voting to go on strike, that in and of itself is a pretty big sign of a or it's a you know, it's a sign of commitment to the cause, to each other, that a lot of people don't have. And then being able to stay out on strike for a month is something that, you know, most workers in this country are never going to do. And these people have done it after having won, like you said, 2 elections. And so what was the process of you know, how did that happen?
Well, I think in broad brush, what we've got here, and that's why I touched on it. I mean, we've got a labor movement and a left wing in this country that like to jump up and down, or some like to jump up and down and make the demand to organize the South. Well, that's a great goal. And the fact is, in the ATU, we're doing it. I did it. The current organizing director is doing it, and that will continue. But I think the crisis is, I use that word crisis, the disastrous crisis, is that the vast majority of the trade union movement in the United States doesn't even attempt to organize in the South. There are some who do, to their tremendous credit. And ATU had that concentration and succeeded, and found what you will find if you go out and talk to workers in the South, just like you'll find if you talk to workers just about anywhere else. They're horribly exploited, underpaid, benefits have been destroyed, they're thrown away at a moment's notice. And when the discussion comes up about trade unionism, if the union is serious to work with them and is willing to persist and be relentless about it, significant success can be had. But we find this crisis. I mean, here we are in Northern Virginia, just across the river from the District of Columbia in Maryland. Once you cross the Potomac River and enter Northern Virginia from that side, the union density drops by about 75%. Now, that's not because the population over here is any more or less pro or anti-union than on that side. It's because the amount of effort put forward by the trade union movement here in Northern Virginia is minuscule compared to the other side. Now, some of this is frankly because it's a so-called right to work state. Nobody has to belong to the union. The union has to earn its keep every single day and keep people in there making their financial contribution and their activism contribution. And we dealt with that. I mean, you're not going to get everybody. And you're absolutely right. I mean, this was a remarkable organizing group. I had total confidence that we could organize it because, again, we were doing other organizing in the region here, and I knew that this would work. The other union kept trying to get people to ratify a contract that had a 25-cent per year increase, and they tried repeatedly to get them to ratify it, and people just dropped out of that union. And then that union did what they called disclaim them. They just wrote a letter and said, you're free to go, and we have no longer any interest in this. And then a couple of them picked up the phone, called me at the International Union, and I said, sure, I'll come right out. And I went out, and I wasn't sure how it was going to happen when I was driving out there, but I went out and went into the garage, actually. It was conducting the union meeting with these folks to explain how ATU membership would work and how we would reorganize them, the kinds of goals and things that we would do. Well, even though it's a county garage, it's public property. The transit company at that time, Transdev, they of course had me, they gave me the heave-ho off the property under threat of arrest. So I said, screw you. And I went out, and my pickup truck was on the public street. So I went up in the back of my pickup truck, and I just conducted a lunchtime meeting. The commuter workers have a big, long break between their morning and afternoon. It's a split shift situation. So I ran a meeting with about 45 people in the street, and it was exciting because people wanted organization. They didn't want a union that wouldn't listen to them. They didn't want a union that would decide for them what was best. They wanted a lot more than 25 cents an hour. because again, it's an extremely, extremely wealthy area now, in the top 10 counties in the United States, and these workers can barely afford to live there because of the cost of housing, among other things. So anyway, we started the ATU organizing that day in 2016. The next day, the Transdev Corporation, again, the predecessor company to Keolis, set up a company union. It was very divisive and confusing, which is what it's for. And it took about 6 more months for workers to see that the company union was never going to answer any of the questions. And we started up our drive. We crushed them in an election, and it was 65-4, I think, in that first Transdev election for ATU. And, here we are. But then here comes Keolis barging into the situation, underbidding dramatically the Transdev Corporation. And then the political leadership, even though it had improved on paper, and many unions, including ATU, had supported these Democrats out there, they found themselves with a very bitterly anti-union company. I should mention, this was not because they talked to ATU. They conducted no due diligence. You might have thought that the contracting county would have said, hey, let's talk to at least one of the unions in the transit field to see what they know about Keolis. Well, that never happened. Never. And in any case, the Keolis company had forced a strike just a little more than a year ago in Reno, Nevada, on the Teamsters who represent Keolis in Reno. And it was I think it was about a 2-month strike, very bitter strike. And their relationship out there was still horrible because of the anti-union nature of this company. Now, the Loudoun County folks, were oblivious to that because they don't want to know this. They only want to know what the company will tell them. And they're like-minded ideology when it comes to how they feel about workers and whatnot. Like I said, folks can deny that. Folks can claim that they're not. Well, they're bigots. They're anti-union bigots, either consciously or unconsciously. And one of the things I'm working on is, we've got other unions in the Keolis company. Keolis in North America is a relatively small company. It's mostly rail. It does commuter rail. It does the Boston commuter rail, the heavy rail, and it does the Alexandria, Northern Virginia rail system. And it has a sprinkling of a dozen or so bus systems around the country. And we had already done some of this previously, but the different unions who work for the company need to be pulled together to have sort of a common knowledge of what's going on, and that will be a parallel event to the strike, but it will help. And the last thing I'll say, the thing that the ATU and other unions need to draw from this is that I think the day has come that I predicted multiple times. The previous president of ATU, Larry Hanley, was well aware of this, that sooner or later, some company on the privatized end, there's about 8 or 9 privatized companies of any size that the ATU deals with. We knew that sooner or later one would emerge who would run a very anti-union program, a union liquidation program, as part of their business model, to try to put a footprint into North America in a non-union fashion, in an anti-union fashion. I think that day is here. It's certainly here with Transdev. That company has grown to become the second largest privatized company that ATU deals with. Now here we have Keolis following in the footsteps. And, for them, it's a political, it's an ideological fight. And I think this group of workers up there are really to be commended for having taken this on. This is a large multinational company. It's shameful that it's the French state railways doing this, but what's new in the United States? Workers are trashed. What's new about that? But anyway,
So
these workers.
has there been any movement in negotiations? Do we have any idea of if there has been any movement or any potential light at the end of the tunnel for these workers in the struggle?
I'll be careful because I'm not doing the bargaining and I am retired, so I should be careful. But my best sense of it is that the company essentially at at the beginning of the strike, what precipitated the strike was they said, here's our final offer, take it or leave it, screw you. And the workers said, hell you, we're going to go on strike. And they've been on strike now for a month. Now, there have been some negotiations in there. I'm not involved in them and whatnot, but I'm unaware of any today. I'm not unaware of any real indications that this thing is close to settlement or, I think it will come together. The history of transit strikes in this fashion are that they last a few weeks, a month or two, and that's that. I mean, at a certain point, let's mention at least one time the worst victims of this entire thing, at least on the equal with what the workers have to do, which is the passenger.
Right.
I mean, the folks who run that transit agency have just unceremoniously dumped these human beings who depend on this service, paratransit and commuter both, and the other things. And they've never even been mentioned in this conversation. ATU would be the only ally that they have. And it's sad. I mean, can you imagine the bus system is just shut down because the agency will not invoke its own contract and bring the parties to bear. So the negotiations, I believe, are sort of continuing, but the positions are pretty much dug in. And it's going to take an equalizer at some point in time. And I think that ATU and these workers are going to stand strong like we have at other places. We had a legendary strike 3 years ago against the Transdev Corporation, also in Northern Virginia at a place called the Cinderbed Road facility. That was an 84-day strike, and it was a tremendous victory for the union. But it took an 84-day strike by a similarly sized group to defeat this anti-union bigotry that these corporations just bring with them almost genetically.
Yeah, and this is Adam jumping in here. It just reminds me of our conversations we've had, today, and of course over the last 2 years about the Warrior Met Coal, who has a very similar mentality regarding the UMWA members down in Brookwood. And it's clear that it's really not about money. I mean, they would make more money had they settled the strike, 20 months ago. But what they are committed to doing is trying to bust the union. And I appreciate you naming that for what it is. It is an anti-union bigotry that is ingrained in the management of these companies and in so many of the politicians who are supposed to be overseeing these companies.
That's right. Yeah. Well, when I was a kid 44 years ago, joining the ATU the first time, and I have, as you mentioned, Jacob, I have belonged and worked for other unions. But when I was trained by the old timers, they always said to me, there's a three-headed hydra of evil here that we're going to be up against. We're going to be up against racists, anti-Semites, and anti-union bigots. Now, maybe we've made some progress on the racism and the anti-Semitism. Hallelujah for that, limited as it may be, but some progress. We haven't made any progress on the anti-union bigotry. Organizing and conducting your union work today in the United States is a virtually illegal act. And it shouldn't be. I mean, the stated goal of the National Labor Relations Board, this would at least cover the private sector workers, is to be an advocate for the workers, to equalize what is a grossly unequal situation. Well, the theme of that has long ago been lost. It's been polluted with corporate ideology. The anti-union bigotry has seeped back in, with some exceptions. There are always some politicians and some NLRB staff, and who will stick up for this, but it's not enough. It's not, and the proof of that assertion would be, look at the condition of the working class today. What an appalling third world condition in many industries, getting worse, which is why I think we're seeing increasing rebellions like this strike, and in all the other places, Starbucks being a fine example of that, Amazon, Trader Joe's, and all the more conventional industries, high tech even. Who could have imagined high tech workers, Google, Apple, joining a union? Well, at a certain point, people are driven to the limit and they rebel. And I welcome it. And I know you guys do too. There's going to have to be some thunder before the rain. Here we go.
Absolutely. Chris Townsend, thank you so much for taking the time with us again today. We appreciate it.
Thank you both. Good luck.
All right.
Appreciate it, Chris.
Bye-bye.
So, Adam, we had prepared 3 other quick hits. Do we want to just hold those for next week, or do we want to try to run through them really quick since they're kind of like newsy type stuff?
Let's see what we got here.
The Disney, the REI, and
I'm okay if you want to go ahead and let's go ahead and talk about those real quick and put it out there, and we can always expand next week as those stories develop.
So for this Disney story, just I want to make sure that I plug this. I'm pulling all of my information on this Disney story minus my comments and analysis from McKenna Schuler, friend of the show, even though we've never had her on. We definitely should. I talked to her on a few occasions, spent some time with her at Labor Notes in Chicago last summer. She is a staff writer for the Orlando Weekly, so definitely check out her article about the contract negotiations. It's titled "Disney World Workers Overwhelmingly Stand Together, Vote No on Company's Offer, Planning to Fight for Better Pay." Check that out. It's at the Orlando Weekly. Great reporter, committed to representing things accurately and from the perspective of working people. But the status is that they've been negotiating, the unions, the 6 unions representing Disney World workers, 42,000 Disney World workers, have been negotiating for several months, and the last best and final from Disney World is only $1 an hour raise for these workers. And so the workers are coming back and saying, that's not enough as we're, fighting to survive in a cost of living crisis. A lot of us are making not very much above the state's minimum wage, and we're, working fairly long hours. And so, they said no. They voted, the unions sent it to the members for a vote with a recommendation that they vote it down, and vote it down they did. 96% of the workers who voted no. So that is a huge rebuke to Disney. And it's funny that one of the things that they're asking for is, I think, a $3 an hour raise, which is certainly doable for a corporation as profitable as Disney. But some of the workers were actually in this contract offered an immediate $3 an hour raise. Such as, like, I think some of the custodial workers were offered that raise, but even they've got pictures of these people who are in, these units that would get that $3 an hour raise, that, have pictures of them saying that, or videos saying that, I'm voting no because everybody deserves this raise, which is a very, very, very cool thing to see. The $3 an hour raise would bring the starting wage at Disney up to $18 an hour from $15 an hour, with additional raises to come over the course of the contract. And workers say that that's the least that they can do. Unite Here Local 737, which is one of the unions representing Disney workers, put out a report last year saying that out of 2,415 tourism workers surveyed, including Disney workers, 69% of them said that they hadn't had money to pay rent or mortgage costs over the last year. 26% say they had to move as a result of rent or mortgage increases, and 45% reported skipping meals to cut costs. Just for reference, she includes in this article that a living hourly wage for 2 working adults with 1 child in Orange County is $32.51 an hour, according to the MIT's living wage calculator, or $18.85 for a single working adult with no children. So it would take $18 an hour to have a sustainable living wage for a single working adult with no children, which is basically like the least expensive household you could possibly have, right? And the wages that these unions are asking for is still ultimately, the starting wage would ultimately be a little bit below that living wage that the MIT calculator puts out. So it's totally a reasonable request.
Absolutely.
From the unions.
And reminiscent of what we just heard from Chris Townsend about, workers who are in an area where they can hardly afford to live, right? I mean, and that's a trend that we're seeing across the country. We're seeing it right here in Huntsville, Alabama, where the folks who are doing the work for the community don't necessarily make enough to even live in that community anymore, and they're being pushed out of their own homes.
McKenna Schuler, the reporter for the Orlando Weekly, who wrote this report, points out that, you know, while all of this is happening, like on the worker side, you know, this is what they're going through. People are having to skip meals. People are asking for less than a living wage for a starting wage. Disney Parks Division, just the Parks Division, like, this is not, you know, their media empire. Disney Parks reported $28 billion in revenue last year and an operating profit, which, let's remember, profit is like revenue minus expenses, of $12 billion. $12 billion. Disney has found the money to pay CEO Bob Iger $27 million and to gift the former CEO, just as a gift, who was fired in November, a $20 million severance package.
Ooh-wee.
Could
$20
you imagine
severance? Oh my God.
Could you imagine getting like a $10,000 severance package? Like,
yeah, any severance package. Any severance package is a win for most workers, but $20 million, and they are lowballing these workers over a $3 an hour raise.
Here's McKenna is just so great. We've got it. I thought about asking her to come on the show to talk about this, but I was like, we got too many guests on the show already. We got too much to talk about. We're going to have to do it quick. But she's great. But she points out that during the 2020 election cycle, the Woke Corporation also found the money to give the re-election campaign of Florida Governor Ron DeSantis $50,000 in March of 2021 and another $50,000 2 years before that. The vote came days after food service workers, and we mentioned this in last week in Southern Labor. This vote came just days after food service workers at the Orange County Convention Center won a new contract delivering on the $18 an hour minimum wage that these unions are fighting for, up from a $13 an hour minimum wage, which is like a huge increase, and a $3 pay raise for every worker covered by the contract. So very, very cool stuff. It also comes the same day multiple media outlets confirmed that Florida lawmakers will hold a special legislative session Monday to discuss a state takeover of Disney World's Reedy Creek Improvement District, among other issues. So that's, you know, a fascinating little wrinkle. I wonder what the deal is there. But maybe we will get McKenna Schuler on at some point to talk about this as this plays out.
Yeah, and I'd absolutely love to know what the unions are thinking about this potential takeover and how it may affect their members. Hopefully the fact that 96% voted down this crappy deal, I hope is a good sign that there's a pretty well organized membership down there that's ready to take on whatever's coming next.
So the REI story that I mentioned, REI has been, REI workers have been unionizing with RWDSU across the country, and the latest to organize is in Cleveland, Ohio, where they have filed for a union election already. And this is a fantastic story because it really shows the power of collective action and worker solidarity. REI sought to challenge the election and extend, which would, potentially extend the process for weeks, right? And REI workers walked off the job, and that same day, REI backed down, and now the election is set for March the 3rd. So really fantastic stuff. Saw this on my Twitter feed from Noam Scheiber. He is a labor reporter for the New York Times. Great reporter. Definitely recommend checking out his work, and he tweeted out a press release from RWDSU saying that the REI Cleveland strike moves company to negotiate election agreement minutes before the NLRB hearing. Which, fantastic. So now the union reports that the union election will move ahead on March the 3rd, 2023, with all NLRA eligible workers. A complete reversal of REI's initial position, and they they go more in depth, saying that today at 1:30 p.m. Eastern Time, REI agreed to terms of an election agreement with the Retail, Wholesale, and Department Store Union and the Cleveland office of the NLRB. The agreement was met immediately following workers walking out this morning on a ULP strike demanding the right to vote in a free and fair NLRB election, and for the company to stop its unlawful surveillance of workers. The workers intend to unconditionally return to work this afternoon. The agreement includes all NLRA eligible workers at the Ohio store, which is a reversal from the REI's position last week. The union election will take place on March 3rd, 2023 from 12 p.m. to 6 p.m. Eastern Time at the Ohio store. So really great win. And Noam remarks later down in the thread that this is one thing that he's learned covering labor over the past several years, which is that your labor rights are typically only as robust as the power that you and your coworkers can muster at the workplace.
Absolutely. Direct action getting the goods.
Yeah. So definitely wanted to relay that to y'all. And with that, I think that we're going to go ahead and wrap, right?
Yeah, sounds great. I know next week we'll probably touch on some of the international labor news that's happening. Wanted to just real quick send love and solidarity and support to the striking workers in France and in the UK and across the globe, really. There's, labor rebellion happening all over. It's not just here in the South, not just here in the United States. Some really interesting developments happening, across the pond over there in Europe. So we'll probably talk a little bit more about that next week. Just your final reminder that if you would like to donate to the February fundraiser, tvlr.fm/expand. That is our special fundraising link. Of course, you can always go to tvlr.fm/donate if you just want to sign up as a regular contributor. That's, the normal donation link, and you can sign up, for a monthly donation of $1, $5, whatever, you may be able to afford. And again, I wanted to emphasize that we recognize not everybody's in a position where they can donate. So liking, sharing, commenting, subscribing, reviewing, and talking to folks about the program and what we're trying to do is a huge, huge benefit that we really appreciate, and wouldn't be able to do it without that kind of support.
Yep, absolutely. And with that, we're going to go ahead and wrap it up. We appreciate y'all hanging out with us. And until next week, see you later. All power to the workers.